make sure that the screen is being shared. I'm going to go ahead and assume that it was a wonderful introduction, even though I couldn't hear it. And I wish I could have been there in person, but unfortunately schedule didn't allow for it. So I am grateful for the technology that's allowing me to join you here today. I want to extend a big thank you to the Wellness 360 team that put together this wonderful conference, Johanna and the crew. So thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of it. And yeah, thanks to everybody that's attending both in person and virtually here today. It's really nice to be with you here. So today we're going to take a look at generational economics and engaging the most diverse workforce in history. So why should we care about this as a topic? Of course, we hear a lot about generational diversity. We also, obviously, as a collective group and as a nation, care a lot about well-being, but why should we be taking a look at the intersection between those two different topics? Well, for the first time in history, we have 5 different generations working side by side in the workplace. So this has never happened before in our country. And these different generations, they have very different interests. They have different preferred learning methods. They have very different health concerns just based on their age alone, right? Unfortunately, as people age, the onset of chronic disease and certain age-related conditions have the opportunity to set in. And then these people are motivated by different things, right? So people from different generations just tend to be a little bit different. As a field, we're always looking at ways that we can advance. So how can we be more effective in the way that we're programming, in the way that we're communicating to our populations? And so this is just one additional way that we can become a little bit more sophisticated in the way in which we are attracting individuals to our well-being programs, in the way in which we are communicating to them. So let's take a look here at who the various generations are. And I kind of want to just preface this as we talk a little bit about some of the characteristics that define the generations, is that, you know, not every single individual within the generation is going to subscribe to the characteristics that I mentioned, and that's okay. But what we have is a group of collective people who all grew up in a similar time period, and they had very similar life experiences as it relates to some of the large major life events. And those big life events did have an impact on the generation and really help shape who they are. So, for example, with our traditionalists, who represent, again, a relatively small percentage of the workforce nowadays, born between 1928 and 1945, they, of course, were defined by some of the major wars, right? They had 2 world wars that they lived through and or participated in. They had the Korean War. They also had the Great Depression. So with this group, it's not surprising to see that they're very patriotic, they're very hardworking, dedicated to their work. They tend to be conservative, both socially and fiscally, and very thrifty as well. So as an effort to kind of introduce you to this particular generation, I did invite our friend Senator Sanders to come in and just give a quick hello. So, Senator Sanders. Hello to my friends working in health promotion. As you are aware, we have a very serious issue facing our country in healthcare and in our tendency to focus on treatment rather than that of prevention. However, I am very encouraged by the great work that you all are doing. What we are building here together, brothers and sisters, is not merely a movement in healthcare. No, what we are building is a healthcare revolution. So now we have our baby boomers and baby boomers, some of the major life events that helped to shape this generation are unfortunately some big assassinations. We had the assassination of JFK and Martin Luther King Jr. We also had the Vietnam War and kind of associated protest and movement along with that war, the Cold War, and then kind of the introduction of space travel. This is a generation that tends to be, again, very dedicated to their work. They can almost be workaholic in nature, independent, competitive, and loyal. Certainly loyal to their careers. This is, kind of a generation, the last generation that we saw that would start and end their career with, perhaps one company, which is, very rare these days amongst some of our younger generations. So representing our baby boomers, we have none other than Bill Clinton. It's an honor to be here representing the baby boomers. It's been a while since I've spent any time in Ohio. So if anybody knows where the party's at later, DMs are open. And then we have our next generation, Generation X, 1965 to 1980, who saw sort of the coming of age of technology and the advent of some really important pieces of technology, the advent of the home computer, video games, internet. This is a very confident generation, very results-oriented, resourceful, and tech-savvy. Generation X is actually really quite adept with technology. They don't necessarily get that praise. That usually goes to millennials and Generation Z, but Generation X is really quite good themselves at leveraging their technological savvy to help streamline processes and generally make things run more efficiently. And so President Obama, good morning, fellow health promoters. I said, good morning, Wellness 360 Nation. Thank you. Thank you. I know, I can't believe it's me either. I decided to come here today to commend all of you on the great work that you're all doing. Now, let me be clear. And let me make my point. Let me make my point, and let me be clear. We got a long way to go here to improve our nation's well-being. But with you great folks in charge, I know we'll get there. And thank you. All right. And finally, we have our millennial generation. We've arrived at those born between 1981 and 1996. Some unfortunate events. Again, school shootings have become all too common for this generation as well as Generation Z. We have, the events on 9/11, other terrorist attacks, and then we have, our first generation that really grew up as digital natives and that they were young enough to truly adapt to technology as it was being invented. Most of these, young individuals, both millennials, Generation Z, grew up with computers in their homes, got cell phones at early ages, knew about social media at an early age. So for the first time ever, we have, a really young group of individuals who are adapting to technology. This is also a group that tends to be very civic-minded, team-oriented, entitled, and also values work-life balance in a way that we hadn't seen in the past. So the other thing that I just wanted to mention here is that you might think that one of the examples, one of the individuals representing the generations might not fit with the others. And I do want to just comment on that quickly in that you would be correct. Not all of these are like the others. Actually, President Obama is considered by many, depending on your definition, to be part of the baby boomer generation, not necessarily Generation X. But other than that, I think we've got a nice cohesive group of representatives here. So let's take a look at where we stand right now in terms of the labor force distribution by generation. The big year was 2016, and that's the year in which millennials took the lead. So forever and ever, it seemed like baby boomers were the largest generational cohort in the U.S. labor force. Generation X took it over for like a couple of years, and then in 2016, millennials took the lead, and they'll be the largest generational cohort for some time. They will eventually get surpassed by Generation Z, but for now it is millennials. And there's obviously been a lot of media attention around this particular generation, in part because it's the most different generation that's ever come across the workforce, but also because it is now the largest generational cohort. If we look at the distribution over the course of a few different points in time, you'll notice that in blue we have 1994, so going back, quite a few years. The latest actual census data that we have from the Pew Research Center, unfortunately, is 2017 data. They haven't updated that in some time, but so what we've added is a couple of projections for a few years from now, 2025 projections. But the interesting thing to point out here is that one, boomers obviously just on a steady decline. So boomers, we have an average of 10,000 baby boomers retiring every single day. And so they're just going to continue to decline in terms of numbers in the workforce. Generation X, not surprisingly, kind of that middle generation has stayed relatively steady, up a little bit from 94 to 2017, and they'll probably drop a little bit in the next few years, but not anything too significant. Millennials is an interesting one just because there were 0 millennials working in 94, and then all of a sudden you have the majority in 2017, and they will continue to be the majority for the next several years. 2025, again, not such a big drop. Gen Z will be the massive increase, right? So in 2017, 5%, nothing appreciable. Of course, we have many more if we were to run a census today, but in just a few short years from now, they will almost be a majority. I mean, they will be close to what the millennials are projected to be, up to 27%. So this is a cohort that is rapidly growing in the workforce. I'd like to dive into a little bit of research, and I'm happy to say that we do have some good research that we can take a look at when it talks about generational issues in the workplace. When I first kind of started exploring this topic, probably about a decade ago, there really wasn't a whole lot of research, which actually led us at AIPM to do some of our own research that I'll be able to share. But in today's day and age, there really is some good stuff, and so I will share some of that with you here now. The first item I want to share is a study that was done. It was a collaborative effort between several organizations. Microsoft was involved, Wired Magazine, the furniture company Herman Miller, Ernst & Young, and what they were taking a look at was generational preference toward collaboration type. This is interesting because we have lots of ways in which we communicate and collaborate within the workplace, but we don't often think about the ways in which people might prefer their communication and collaboration, and we certainly probably aren't thinking about it in terms of, is generation a part of this? And so the options were, in-person meetings, virtual online meetings with and without video, email, team workspaces in person, instant messaging, social networking, enterprise social messaging, social networking, things like Yammer, persistent chat, which has of course become extremely popular. That would be like your Slack and Microsoft Teams, and then conversational user interfaces, which are actually AI-driven communication. So what I wanted to kind of point out are a couple of different categories here. And these ones are almost perfect linear progressions where as you become, if you were looking at it on a graph, as you become older in age, these types of communication become less interesting or less preferable. And that's virtual online meetings with video and then persistent chat. So perhaps the two most common ways in which people are communicating now, depending on how your workplace is set up, but a lot of us are either remote or hybrid. Regardless of where you're at, online meetings with video have become a lot more popular, and so has persistent chat with Slack and Teams. And what's interesting here is that older people, typically prefer these types of communication less so than younger people. Another one that I wanted to point out is the team workspaces. So, collaborating in person is almost universally preferred by all groups. So something to consider, when planning collaboration meetings, thinking about communicating with others. One of the things that we just tend to do as humans is we tend to default to the form of communication that we prefer. So if we like to send email, we'll kind of default to email with those that we communicate with. If we really like, talking on the phone, we'll default to phone. If we really like, Slack or Teams, we'll default to that. We're oftentimes not considering what the other individual on the other end or the other team members might prefer on their end. So just something to consider, and your communication, your collaboration might end up being a lot more effective if you're communicating with individuals in the way that they prefer, as opposed to just thinking about the way in which you prefer it. So another study I wanted to bring up that I found interesting is tobacco quit rates. Kaiser Foundation Health Plan took a look at a comprehensive tobacco treatment program. They treated two groups, exact same program. It was a 12-week in-person, really comprehensive tobacco treatment program, and they found really good quit rates. But what they found is, and the only difference between the two groups, by the way, was age, right? So one group was older and one group was younger. The younger group was 20 to 40 years of age, and the older group was 40 to 60 years of age. Exact same program. And what they found was at the end of the treatment program, they had strong quit rates among both groups, but the younger group quit at a 10% higher rate. So 70% versus 60% among the older group. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it, but it's interesting to see it in the data that the longer that an individual has been fine-tuning those poor health habits, perhaps the harder it is to change. So finally, I want to share some of the research that we launched a few years ago at the American Institute for Preventive Medicine, taking a look at generational wellness and attitudes toward health improvement. We did a really comprehensive study, asked about all sorts of interests in different topics of well-being and what participation might look like and what would motivate participation. I'm going to share a few of the slides with you here, but if you want to download the full report, we do have it available for free. It's available at healthylife.com/generations. So you can download the full report. There's an executive summary, and we get into all of the questions of the study, so you can access the full report there. But let's just take a look first at this question related to interest in wellness topics. So even when we're thinking about considering, what topics within well-being should we bring into the program, there is variance amongst people of different ages. And some of those I think are rather predictable and some of them are not. So for instance, something like preventing injury or chronic pain. You might suspect that as people get older, a topic like chronic pain and injury would become more interesting. This is something that affects older populations more readily, and that's exactly what we found in the data. However, what about something like sleep enhancement? That might be a little bit more ambiguous. What we found here, and actually this would have been contrary to hypothesis going into the study, but actually younger people tend to be a little bit more interested in the topic of sleep enhancement for whatever reason. So again, when bringing in topics, good idea to kind of take a look at, what might be interesting for the different generations, making sure to mix it up in terms of topics that are interesting to younger people, topics that are interesting to our older generations, and then also topics that are sort of universally agreed upon as an interesting topic. So some thoughts there. And then this question we found interesting, mostly because there was universal disagreement. Regardless of the answer type, there was no agreement among the generations. And the question was, when you feel ill, what are you most likely to do? So you're not feeling well, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to the doctor? Are you going to search the internet? You're going to talk to friends? You're going to, search out something else? And just virtually no agreement amongst the generations. So just kind of an example of how different we are and how important it is to offer, different modes of delivery when it comes to information and resources. This is another one we found interesting. Incentives are obviously a pretty big part of our field, and could spend a lot of time just talking about effective use of incentives and how that strategy can be set up. But for the sake of today's time together, I just want to touch on some generational differences that I found to be interesting, and that's that lower insurance premiums, which are a common way to provide incentives in our field, were more preferred by older generations. And the interesting thing is, for the same amount of money, cash was more preferred among younger generations. But when it's delivered in a different medium, so when it's delivered as insurance premiums versus cash, you find a difference among the generations. And perhaps our older generations might be a little bit more familiar with how expensive insurance can be, and dealing with insurance for perhaps larger family, whereas younger people, cash is king, I suppose. But kind of an interesting point there, in that even if you have the exact same budget for your incentives, what you offer and how you offer it can actually differ in the response that you get among your population. So something to consider there. Another thing that is kind of interesting on this slide is that there's actually no statistical difference between providing a Fitbit device and not meeting an incentive at all. So kind of interesting. Sometimes, and if a program is really well designed, and we'll kind of talk about some other motivators, especially for some young folks, you may not need incentives as much as you may have thought previously. So the last study we're going to take a look at, and this is actually one of my favorites in the field, taking a look at beliefs and attitude toward vegetarian lifestyle across the generations. And this is a study that Peter Priebus and his colleagues conducted at the University of New Mexico. I really like this study because I think it's so representative of kind of a larger theme that we see in the space of generational differences as it relates to health behaviors. And so he had 4 main reasons why somebody might adopt a vegetarian lifestyle. The kind of moral, ethical reason, so kind of treatment of animals. The health reason, somebody that's interested in eating more plant-based for nutritional reasons. Environmental reasons, and then the final was faith reasons, so some sort of religion or faith-based reason for adopting a vegetarian lifestyle. We're going to kind of ignore the faith-based reason, only because there's not really any statistical difference among the generations, which makes sense. If you adopt it for a religious reason and you maintain your involvement in that religion, you're unlikely to change your views on vegetarian lifestyle over time. But what we do find is that for the health reason, we have a statistical difference between older generation and younger generation. So older generation being more likely to adopt the vegetarian lifestyle for health reasons when you compare it to a generation that's younger than them. On the contrary, for moral reasons and environmental reasons, we have the exact opposite. We have a younger generational cohort with a statistically significant higher likelihood of adopting vegetarian lifestyle for moral reason or environmental reason. So the sort of take home point here that I think is really profound is that we sort of spend a lot of time assuming that individuals are motivated by their health, whether it be in the short term or long term. A lot of the marketing and communication that we put forth to get people involved in well-being programs has to be with improved health, exercising more, eating healthier, even a lot of the mental health, the benefits that we're pushing are, feeling better and improving well-being overall, improving health. But as it turns out, and the data kind of bears this out, is that younger people aren't necessarily always motivated by those outcomes. In fact, older generations aren't always motivated by improved health either. So the question becomes, what can we do to sort of leverage what we know in a way that will end up motivating individuals in a more meaningful way? And so this is kind of where the term generational economics comes from. This idea that there might be other motivations out there that are a little bit more interesting, a little bit more thought-provoking to various generations, as opposed to just the sort of traditional, you should do this because it's good for you. So how does this bear out in the real world? I've got an interesting story for you that took place on a college campus several years back, when this particular campus was attempting to ban tobacco use, ban cigarettes all across the entire campus. And there was, mostly a supportive response. People understand that this is a public health issue and smoking probably shouldn't be allowed on campus. However, there was a really outspoken minority that was kind of sticking up for their civil liberties and saying that that this ban was, an infringement upon their liberty. So the students were not concerned at all about the health impact of smoking, but it was really more about their freedom to just sort of do as they wish. Meanwhile, almost at the exact same time that the cigarette ban was trying to be passed, there was a push to ban beverages from a particular large soda manufacturer. And as health professionals, we might think of this and see this and just sort of be excited that there was a ban on soda because they're really bad for you, right? These are, sugar-loaded beverages. But what mattered most to the students had nothing to do with the health. It was all about how this particular company treated its employees in overseas, in other countries. So health really had nothing to do with the students' motivation. With that said, if we return to the tobacco ban, what if the university presented it not as a health-related initiative, but what if they linked it to the terrible practices of big tobacco? Some things we know, like marketing to youth and minorities and vulnerable populations. What if that was the angle that the university took? Might they have gotten a different response amongst their student population based on what we know and what we saw from the beverage manufacturer? It seems as though it might have gotten a different response. So messaging matters. The way in which we sort of package our message definitely can make a difference. And considering who the audience is a good idea when it comes to how we package up that messaging. So another example I want to share of generational economics at work is a bike ride that takes place in the city of Detroit, and it's called Slow Roll. This is a sort of well-being event that by all accounts has gone viral, right? So it started as a ride among 10 friends and quickly grew into a really well-organized ride of over 4,000 individuals riding on a different route throughout the city each week. How did this event take off in the way that it did? There's two primary reasons. Number one, I would say that the messaging really was never about health. when people talk about Slow Roll, it was all about re-energizing the city, repopulating the city. It was about community and social connection. It was about, exploring the city and really just about connecting with those around you. And even though the byproduct of this social connection event was a bike ride, you never heard anything about the exercise of it. That just sort of was baked in. And the second reason that, it really was able to go viral was grassroots support. So this event is run completely by volunteers. It's, nonprofit. They don't collect any money. They do collect donations, but there's no charge to ride. And so it was grown completely organically. And the idea here is that when people feel connected to a mission, and the mission that they were connected to didn't have anything to do with health. It was all about those other factors that we talked about, the reconnecting, the social connection, the repopulating the city. And so when people feel connected to a mission in that way, they will find a way to support it. Thus the power of grassroots support. Now, there's a lot of chatter in our field about the importance of leadership support, and for good reason, but I don't think there's enough chatter about the importance of grassroots support. So just something to consider there. And when we think about, how do we message and craft our message to the various audiences, one thing that I want to perhaps recommend is that you mix up your message. It's okay to promote one singular event in multiple ways in the hopes that it will resonate differently with different groups. So a couple examples of that, we like to promote biking for many reasons, but biking for health can also look like, reducing emissions, and it can be promoted that way. Eating healthy, eating more fruits and vegetables can also look like and sound like shopping locally at farmers markets to help support the local economy and promote environmental factors that way. Getting your steps in can be a health-related activity, but it can also be a way to connect socially through a walking meeting, or it can be a way in which we can recommend that an individual connect with nature. If they might be on their own at home, working from home, we can encourage them to take meetings from outside as a walking meeting, as a way to kind of, get out, have a mindfulness moment to connect with nature while they're on the meeting. So there are different ways in which we can communicate to help, again, engage people that might have different motivations in mind. So a couple other things I want to mention around things that might transcend the generations. So of course, we want to take a look at things that are generationally specific and how we might target those generations. But I think it's also important to consider some philosophies and ideas that, regardless of the generation, might be a good strategy to employ. And the first one I want to talk about is self-determination theory. So if you're familiar with self-determination theory, it is a theory of motivation, and the three primary components are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Essentially saying that these, if an individual has these three items, they're going to be more successful and more motivated. The reason why I have mastery and purpose in parentheses there is that self-determination theory is an excellent theory of motivation. It is not excellent at marketing itself. On the contrary, Daniel Pink came along years later and wrote a book called Drive and did a much better job of marketing self-determination theory. And he used a little bit better terminology and a little bit better language to get it out there. And so he calls it autonomy, mastery, and purpose. They're essentially the same things. So we can talk about it as self-determination theory. We can talk about it as the examples from Daniel Pink's book Drive, and whether you want to use competence or mastery, relatedness or purpose. I actually think that the terms that Daniel Pink popularized are kind of more commonplace. We hear a lot about purpose and mastery and autonomy, whereas competence and relatedness, not as mainstream. certainly in our space. So autonomy, allowing people to contribute to their own job description, right? And one of the good examples is a software technology company in Australia called Atlassian. Once a quarter, they give their developers a chance to work on whatever they want for 24 hours, and then they share the results with the company. And that one day has resulted in a slew of new products and enhancements for the company. Mastery, of course, the idea that people just have a general desire to become, really good at a particular skill. Why do people want to learn instruments and become musicians? Knowing that the likelihood of becoming a famous musical artist is a long shot, and a lot of people don't even have that as the desire. They just simply want to master the skill, or learning a language. So people like to feel competent in a skill. That's something that feels good to individuals, and they're more likely to do it when they feel competent or feel as though they've mastered that skill. And finally, purpose. People like having purpose. People like doing good for the world and feeling like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. So, Wikipedia is the largest encyclopedia anywhere in the world. It's the 7th most visited website on the internet. Wikipedia doesn't collect $1 in ad revenue. They're funded entirely by individual donations, and all of their editors are volunteers. 32 million volunteer editors for Wikipedia. So the idea here is that, when people feel connected emotionally to a purpose bigger than themselves, they're really likely to contribute. So the more you can tie your employees' work and certainly the well-being program to something bigger than the organization and bigger than the well-being program, something, outside of the organization, feeling a part of something bigger than themselves, the better. So something to consider as we're communicating the message of work and the message of well-being. So couple thoughts on making the workplace more human as well. This is, again, just the idea that, we have more ways to communicate with each other than ever before. Technology is readily available, but we're probably less connected on a human level than ever before. So, bringing the human element and just connecting on a human level is a workplace engagement strategy. Taking a look at our team members as people first and the people that they are, rather than just kind of workers that might be replaceable, that can go a long way toward creating an engaged workforce and an engaged well-being program. A couple points here: prioritizing strengths. We spend sometimes too much time looking at individuals' weaknesses and trying to improve upon weaknesses, whereas we might just play into the strengths of individuals and really celebrate those and prioritize them. Mindfulness matters. A lot of, spotlight on mental health and well-being over the last few years and probably, a better part of the last decade, and for good reason. Individuals need our support, but they also need the space to make time for mental health and well-being within the workplace. I like to think about the workplace as a place of belonging. Oftentimes we think about if you ask, if you were to poll your employees, where do you feel the strongest sense of belonging? You're unlikely to see the workplace as kind of the top, one, two, or three items. It's usually, either something faith-based or family or home and, things like that, with friends. But what if we could make the workplace one of those destinations where individuals feel a really strong sense of belonging? Do you understand the personal values of your team? This is, really getting to know an individual on a deeper personal level when you can really know what motivates them, what makes them tick, what are their personal values. And then encouraging connection at every moment. So with you and the people that you interact with on a regular basis, but also making the space for others to communicate. At AIPM, we've done some really nice things to encourage connection among our team. We have meetings that are set up where, the only point of the meeting is a quick little connection point that are facilitated by different staff members each week. But the point of the meeting really is just connection. We call them Connect 15. It's a 15-minute connection point. We've also arranged what we call buddy chats, where we pair people with others outside of their particular department or usual team. And again, the point is to like have coffee in the morning and just connect. The only purpose of the meeting is connection. It's not work related. Talk about whatever you want. You just connect on a human level. So just some final thoughts here.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
You were just asking me to wrap up.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect timing. Final thoughts here. Get input from all the generations. One of the things that's nice about generational diversity, it's not taboo. You can add people of different generations to your committees. You can collect interest survey data, organize it by generation, and take a look at the information that way. You can bring in generationally diverse speakers and instructors. And then finally, we've talked about generational diversity, but of course there are lots of forms of diversity. So kind of as maybe a next step, consider the needs of all different groups and how we can more effectively communicate and bring them and make everybody feel comfortable. So thank you. Would love to stay connected. Really an honor to be with you here today, and would love to connect either by email or on LinkedIn. So thanks again for the opportunity, and hope everybody enjoys the rest of the day.
Thank you, Brett. That was absolutely very interesting. I really love the point about the different ways to connect. This is the first year I had to download Slack on my phone, and now I'm constantly in connection with people through Slack instead of doing, the instant messages or even text messages. So it's a very interesting topic. So thank you again, Brett. We are going to take a quick, let's call it like maybe a 5-minute break so that we can, everyone else here can stretch a little bit, and we'll get transitioned right into our next speaker. So let's just reconvene in about 5 minutes.
All right, and we're back. So for our next presenter, having toured nationally for 20 plus years on the comedy club, corporate circuit, performing with the likes of Martin Short, Jim Gaffigan, and John Oliver, Jeff Wowser now pulls back the curtain on digital distraction, helping people both working at home make better decisions with their screen use time. I'm probably one of those that need this presentation today. Through keynotes and breakout sessions, Jeff educates individuals on digital balance practices so that they, not their devices, are controlling their attention and ultimately their days. So without further ado, welcome to Jeff.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So I want to first thank Johanna and the staff for inviting me here. It's an honor and goes a while of your time. So I thought I'd start off with a little topical joke. I thought I was going to do a vaccination joke, but I think, no, some of you won't get it. So the jokes are funny. They're disappointing. So. But it's been an interesting few days. 4 days ago, I was out in my Yellowstone. I was camping there, and like an idiot, I forgot my rain card. Oops, there's nothing. It's trash. So, and then I came in here a few days early. I was in Cleveland. It's a very green, very environmental piece of point for kids who are playing that game, rock, recycling paper, scissors. And, so, but the neighbor, I went to the neighbor's house. They had a big party because their son graduated from Ohio State 2 years ago. He spent the last 2 years walking across the width of the country. And they're all excited because he had just returned and he was working as a concierge at a downtown hotel in Cleveland. And the whole time during this party, I'm looking and saying, oh my God, I just pitied the first hotel guest who asked if the airport's in walking distance to downtown Cleveland. So it's, anyway, let's get down to brass tacks here. So yeah, I talk about digital balance, and when I have more time, usually I go to the crowd, we talk about people's versions of the perfect day. And I do this all over the globe, and when everyone talks about the perfect day, it's always about being outdoors, spending time with family, being active, fishing, camping, playing tennis, playing golf, working out, running the motorcycles. Never once did I ever hear anyone say their version of a perfect day would be spending over 3 hours on the phone. We're spending over 2 hours in social media, which is what we're all averaging per day right now. Forfeiting our chance to have a perfect day, be at our best. So I just want to clarify before I continue further, I am not anti-tech. I'm not a Luddite. I'm not trying to make everyone Amish here. It's just, I'll be the first one to admit, I think our devices are absolutely amazing. We can all agree that. Just after that's the problem. They're too basic. We cannot take our eyes off the screens. And so that's why we need some kind of digital balance in our lives. Just by a show of hands, how many people wish they could cut back on their phones, on their devices? Pretty much mostly us, yeah. So that's what digital balance is about. Digital balance is not about throwing away your computers, your phones, but it's digital balance is just about throwing away our potential. Our focus is constant online distraction to the extent so we're ruining our potential. And I should know because I had my brain hijacked on the internet, rewired, if you will, to the extent I now have difficulty focus. And to be honest with you, it pisses me off. And that's my why. That's why I go around the globe talking about digital balance. Because if this could happen to me, it could happen to anyone. And when I say that, me, is because I lived a very, okay. Do we have the tech person here? So maybe we can do it by the computer. If not, we'll just kind of wing it here. Let's see what happens. No. Well, anyway, we'll just believe me. It's tech person? No? Okay. So I've lived a very outdoor life. My whole life has been geared on the outdoors. So that's why I'm saying to me, if this could happen to me, it's not because I'm anti-tech. It's just I spend a lot of my time outside. And it's, give me a second here. Oh, you show up. The battery? Okay, it's working. So, okay, thank you. How about the tech group here? Good, okay, I'm gonna start over. So I think it was a vaccination show. So anyway, so getting back to my story is that my whole life is geared around the outdoors. And my love for the outdoors is given me by my dad as a kid, and here I was with my big brother, my dad, I was so sick of the outdoors. And then my love for the outdoors, it puts me to become a stand-up comedian because I love the idea of having my days free. As a comedian, you work at night, so I can have my days free, spend it outdoors, running from bears, whatever. So I became a stand-up when I was living in Vail, Colorado, doing the ski bump thing. It was a year I was touring nationally, and once you're in the performing arts, you have no benefits. All you have is time. And I decided to put my time to use. And because I only worked like 1 hour a night, I had all this time, so like, okay, I might as well start freelance writing. I know some of your jokes, so I began freelance writing, so I started to spend a lot of time on the screens. And I began freelance writing for magazines, and it was great. It was a perfect marriage with comedy. You can take a tour, I could write from anywhere, just getting that screen. But then I got greedy. I started writing for companies, and suddenly kaboom. I had clients all over the world, and I was spending 30, 40, 50, 60 hours a week on my screens. And I remember my girlfriend at the time said, watch it, it's gonna get you. You're gonna get addicted. I'm like, there's no way. Not me, I'm too wedded to the outdoors. Besides where I lived at the time, my neighbors at 8,524 feet, my neighbors would disallow me being stuck on my screens. And any given day, I'd have fox on my deck. I'd have mule deer on my deck. I'd have elk staring at me through my bathroom window, and yeah, it was creepy. I also had mountain lions. This is not my house, it's my neighbor's house. I can park anything here today. If you ever get a chance to live in mountain lions, do so. It makes life so much more good setting. Clean the windows. It's exciting. Of course, I had bears on my deck. And when this picture was taken, the bear was staring at me. I'm staring at that bear. I'm thinking, oh my God. state, we run a salmon called New Jersey. So I had all this, it was just stunning. Outside door, everything my life was geared to. It's living the perfect life. I had immediate outdoor access to everything I loved. The world-class game was just down the road from me. And all this amazing wildlife. It's like living in a zoo, reverse, like animals would come to me. I had no reason to spend time on my screen, and yet it was not enough. Okay. And the first warning sign for me is I began missing writing deadlines. I had never had this problem before. I was always punctual. I took a lot of pride in that. And suddenly, anytime I did an assignment, I had to need another day, need another week. It didn't matter if I had 3 days or 3 weeks to make this deadline. I could not do it. It wasn't because I did not want to write. It was because I could not write. I no longer had the mental focus to sit down and write. And it would drive me nuts. Because before I could go 5, 6, 7 hours a day with just writing, and now I'm lucky if I can go 15 minutes. Working on our screens, and also lucky to also be stopped. It's like, geez, why don't you go check the email? How many people say they're just going to do a quick check of email? There's no such thing, is there? Because you check it, you might have to respond to it. That takes time. Or else someone says you a video, watch the video. Or the thing for me, the worst, someone sends you a link. Next thing you know, you fall down that rabbit hole. And it's just gone. I had this a few months ago, a short while ago. I went online to check my bank's standard morning hours. Should have taken me, 2 minutes? 55 minutes later, I found myself reading about the baited habits of South American algorithms. I had no idea what the hell I did. If you want to annoy yourself next some web surfing, check your history of what you just searched. You swear you're on acid. It's just crazy. You're just going everywhere. And if I had more time, I'll show you what I would. It's just stunning. So then my next big concern was the lack of reading focus. That was the next red flag. And I loved reading. I could read for hours, and suddenly I find myself and sit down and read a book. 1, 2 pages later, I'm thinking, I should go online. I no longer have the stamina now to even read. What drives me nuts now is when I left my house the other day, I counted, and now I have 7 books open. I used to be book monogamous. Now I have like this little book affair in every little room. I go upstairs and have like a 4-page tryst with anybody. And I come downstairs and I have a 7-page affair of Malcolm Gladwell. I just bounce from everywhere. I never had this problem before. And of course, the next one, the third red flag is every task began taking longer. Just when I said writing, that would take longer. It's just little stuff. I'd be outside, like working in the yard, chopping wood, also go inside, to get a glass of water, should be 3 minutes. What do I do? First thing to go online, I don't even know I'm doing this. I go online. I'm checking texts, checking emails. It's like a 20-minute time suck. And I had someone a few weeks ago, it's like, well, it's only 20 minutes. But if I do that 3 times in one day, that's do that every day for a week, that's 7 hours every day for months, that's 30 hours. That's the equivalent of 2 entire waking days just squandered to mindless checking on the screen. So I didn't blame the internet, though, initially. I just thought the reason why I didn't have time anymore, the reason why I wasn't getting things done, is because I was too busy. Until one day, I came across this quote. Writer Gene Crum said, don't say you have enough time. You have exactly the same number of hours per day that were given to Helen Keller, Pasteur, Michelangelo, Mom Teresa, Da Vinci, Tom Jefferson, and Albert Einstein. And when I saw that, it was like an epiphany going off my brain. Woo, 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 of course. Woo, I didn't plan. I didn't have time to read 7 exclamation points, accomplished so much. But then I started thinking about what do these 7 people have in common besides being dead? No computers, no distractions. And in all due respect, I'm certain if they had the distractions we have today, they would not have been productive. Because Michelangelo had been on texting, it's like, what in the hell was I thinking taking this lame ceiling job? Hashtag Sistine Chapel sucks. Thomas Jefferson, you would have been playing that Grand Theft Horse Buggy. But can you imagine social media would exist back then? All our historical figures would have been out there. When I wrote Mystique, all our historical figures. Like George Washington was crossing the Delaware, he would have posted stuff like, oarsmen yelled at me for standing up and voting. Stupid oarsmen. Wilbur and Old Wright, they would have posted something Our neighbors, we have somebody topless. Just discover White House, see what friends. Jesus, he would have tweeted something like, I cannot believe I can't find a restaurant in seats 13. Hashtag last supper. So man, that joke usually gets me last. Everyone can hear me okay? I just want to make sure I have all three. So slow down, just straight your hand. So anyway, when I saw this, I started, it's like, oh my God, distractions. That's why we're not getting things done. I started to look into it, and it's bothering everyone. Gloria Marr, professor at University of California, Irvine, she did a study where she found the average worker in an 8-hour workday checks their emails 77 times per day. Some people think that's pretty conservative. But think of that. That's almost like 10 times per hour, once every 6 minutes. And she also found once we are distracted, it takes us just a little more than 23 minutes to regain our full focus. So we are going through our days just in a complete fog, which explains why I can't get running done. Every time you're distracted, it takes that long. That amount of time to get back to your focus. My goodness. So and of course, now the research firm Basics, they did a study, and they said because of text and email distractions, in the United States alone, we lose 650 billion annually in lost production. It's like distraction has become our new default mode. We now 90% of our texts, 95% of our texts are read within 3 minutes, and on average responded within 90 seconds. And on average, we send and receive 94 texts per day. So think of that. We're just allowing our devices to constantly distract us. We check our phones 150 times per day. Again, that's almost 10 times per hour, once every 6 minutes. We allow our phones to do this, but we now, what do you do, sir? Yeah. Okay, and your name? My name's Tony. And ma'am, what's your name? Shirley. Tony, how would you feel if Shirley had them coming out to you every 6 minutes and said, hey, Tony, let's get a picture. Hey, Tony, I want to see a picture of my vacation. She did that every 6 minutes. What would you tell her? I'm enjoying it, but in a very yes. But we allow our devices to do this. And just as a side note, I was speaking to the future business leaders of America, teenagers, created that same scenario. It was getting Dylan and Jesse, like, hey, Dylan, how can you feel Jesse every 6 minutes? I want to see a picture of my postcard or my report card. I want to see a picture of my. What would you tell her? He goes, I wouldn't tell her anything. He goes, I would text her to leave me alone. And when I asked, I said, you wouldn't tell her? And he goes, no, talking makes me feel vulnerable. Texting allows me to control what I say. And this is the future business leaders of America, where they can't even talk. So it's absolutely frightening. So what's really frightening about our devices, they don't even have to be on anymore to distract us. The Air Force Academy did a study where they put 3 different groups of people in 3 different rooms. They're all getting, one room had no computers, one room had computers with screens, with computers with access, and other had computers without access. They're all getting the same lesson, and then they're tested after how well we retain the information. Not surprisingly, the group without computers scored the highest. Well, what shocked them was in the group that had computers without access scored just as poorly as the group that had computers with access. So it's almost like your devices are secondhand smoke. Just having your phone in front of you, your computer in front of you, that is distraction in itself. You should always think about it. You're always, oh, should I look at it? Should I look at it? The research firm, a cybersecurity firm out in the Kaspersky lab in Germany, they did a similar study where they put people in 4 different scenarios. At a desk with the phone on top of it, at a desk with the phone in the drawer, at a desk with the phone across the room in a purse or backpack, or at a desk with the phone outside the room. They're all getting a lesson. They're all taught or tested how well to retain that information. The farther away the phone, the higher the scores. It's a 26% difference between having the phone out of the room and having the phone on top of the desk for retention. So our devices, they don't even have to be on. They distract us. So anyhow, with all this in mind, I was like, man, so I did a time audit, and I found this is what I was doing on a daily basis: sleep 7.5 hours, basics, eating, showering, watching Rachel Ray, getting the dog inside for the treat 10 minutes, getting dog for treat 3 hours. Dog owners here, dog owners, you want dog? Hey man, the pink, what kind of dog do you have? What? Wow, big dog, small dog? Little dog? Oh, like a foo-foo dog? Foo-foo dogs aren't dogs, man. Those are cats that drag. Okay, okay, good. Okay. Oh, good. Okay, awesome. Okay. How about you, man? What do you have? Yeah. Oh, gosh, good for you. $4. Good for you. Good. Yeah. I love big dogs. I got a chocolate lab. Got him for Easter. Had his big dog. Did that? Like, why? They drink out of toilets. My dog's protective of it too. I use the bathroom. They just look like, what the hell are you doing? I can't sit on the couch. You can sit there as taking my refreshment stand. And yes, I did rest. So exercise 30 minutes, recreation, so fun, one at screen time, 11 and a half hours. And that's just shocked me. And it wasn't like I was spending like 11 and a half consecutive hours. It was like 3 hours here, 2 hours here. I never allowed myself to pull away from my screen. And then I looked at what I was doing per hour, checking email 3 times, social media 3 times, social media after submitting posts 6 times, news sports, reading the websites 3 times. No wonder I could no longer focus. Wasn't doing anything done. I'm doing that much checking all that per hour. And again, the only solace I took from this is that I'm alone. As I said before, we now average check. In 2008, we averaged 18 minutes per day on our phones. Today, 3 hours and 54 minutes. To put that in context for you, over the course of 1 year, it's 58 days. Think of that. That's like willfully forfeiting all of July and all of August just to be looking at it. 67% of us check our phones in the middle of the night and or during sex. What the hell is wrong with us? Oh my, can you imagine that? It's like, oh, Janet Patterson just posted photos with these throat dogs. This is my home comedy club in Denver, Colorado. They worked with the Dave Chappelle, and this was a while back. Now a lot of venues have this, where they developed a pouch. You put your phone in a nylon pouch, it's magnetized shut, and you can access it for 90 minutes. And if you want to access it, all you do is just step out of the showroom. Like stepping out here right now, give to a staff member, they'll demagnetize it, the pouch, and access your phone. You would not believe how many people will not give up their phones for 90 minutes to see a live comedy performance. Not some cheap act like me, like top names like Gaffigan and Chappelle and Bill Burr and all that. And people will not give up their phones for minutes. Recently, I was at last 2 weeks ago, I was out in Phoenix. I was speaking at the National Recreation Park Association's annual conference. Dr. Sanjay Gupta from CNN thing. He was giving morning keynote, he was on stage. Half the audience was on their phone. This is 5 minutes in. People are already on their phones. The gentleman right next to me, the guy on the right, he was on Facebook where his entire speech of Dr. Sanjay Gupta left the stage, never started clapping. He could not even put his phone down. Instead, he clapped by slapping his right hand. It's just absolutely stunning how our phones have us totally hypnotized. We now on average spend 2 hours and 22 minutes per day on social media. Again, to put that into context, over the course of 1 month, that's the equivalent of an entire weekend and 2.25 days. Like it's willfully forfeiting 1 weekend per month just to be looking at dancing cat videos. And these are just the general public. If I start talking about the kids, it's absolutely frightening. Anyone have kids here? Do you struggle now with the grade? Do you struggle with your kids? Yes. How's he handling that? How's he handling that?
I believe that.
That's one of the things you have to do. You got to get an alternative. It's maddening though, as a parent or anyone with kids. It's just, there was a study, Adam Alter, it's a fantastic book, it's called Irresistible. He polled hundreds of teenage kids, asked them, would they rather give up their phone or have a phone busted in their hand? 46% of the kids would rather have their hand busted. And what's most shocking about it was the questions the kids asked to come up with a decision. Like, which hand would be busted? Absolutely stunning. Jean Zwenge, she's a professor at San Diego State University. She studies teen generations with all the way back to the 30s. And every generation, she said, pretty much similar. They might have a little bit different, slight deviation when it comes to independence. Suddenly, 2012, also an spike for teen suicide, teen depression. What happened in 2012? That's the year phones became ubiquitous. According to hospital admissions, since 2009, self-inflicted non-fatal injuries with girls 10 to 14 years old, 180. Suicide, that same age group, 150. Yeah, 2009, what happened? That's when social media started to take off. So it's really affecting our kids. And of course, it's affecting all of us, our physical and mental health. The last 15 years, rickets has quadrupled in the United States. I got 5 minutes? Oh gosh, I gotta really go through this. You were supposed to tell me, but it's okay. Okay, sorry, I'm gonna break through this. So rickets is quadrupled in the United States. It's not all because our screens, but our screens are contributing sedentary lifestyles. In the United States, 67% of adults, 31% of kids are overweight. Again, our screens are not the cause of this, but it's contributing because it's causing sedentary lifestyles. But we're from the screen, we're more apt to eat. 1 out of 4 American adults is now under some psychiatric medication. Not surprising when you think from the second we wake to the second we go to bed, we are bombarded by screens. Elevators have screens, gas pumps have screens, every waiting room has screens. No matter where we go, we are just constantly shouted at by screens, just this constant stimulant, just feeding our brains. Imagine a cup of coffee, you have a mug, you're pouring that mug, just your cup is overflowing. That's what our brains are like, but we're just constantly. You never have a chance to exhale, just constantly overstimulated by your devices. And this is the 3-year-old kid, crazy hostess ding dongs. That is what the internet is based its business model after. A 3-year-old crazy hostess ding dongs and drinking Red Bull, which is screaming at you, look at me! That is their business plan, because that's how they make money. The more we look at the screens, the more money they're making, so they do not want us to be following agendas, going after personal goals. They want us on our screens. So I've got to move ahead here. It's coming to this point, folks. We're getting so used to the virtual world, we don't even know the real world anymore. And I love the fact that you have a tripod. But I'll give you, so I want to do some tests. I want to tell you what else that came to me one day where else I was backpacking in Moab, Utah. And I was just like, I just can't stand my life anymore, being so distracted. I wish I could get anything done. It's like, gotta come to some kind of resolution. And we gotta live with our devices. We can't just throw them away. And so what I did is like, also one day I started to go for walks without my phone. And then I started running errands without my phone. And then I started having dinner without my phone. And for the first month, it was tough. It was like having all those phantom dreams, where's my phone? But once you get over it, it's like that. It's like getting on a bad relationship. We're also you break up your phone, and it's like, oh my God, what the hell was I thinking? This is awesome. And also I started to be more focused. My days were more fulfilling. They weren't as frustrating. I still struggle with it, but I've gotten better. I know how to balance now. I know how to find time to wait. That's what digital balance is. It's their devices. It's just finding your boundary, your amount of time you need per day. Just unplug, just to detoxify your brain from your screens. And so here are some tips I'm going to give you. 1, stop using your phone as an alarm clock in the bedroom. Because what happens is your phone is an alarm clock, you wake up, first thing you do, grab your phone, and then right away you're checking texts, you're checking emails. 30 seconds in your day being reactive rather than proactive. My sister she teaches autistic kids, she says it's 45 minutes per day. Clean your phone. By that I mean remove all your most favorite apps from your devices. If you're always on Facebook, if you're always on Instagram, just take them off your phone so you can only access them with your home computer. This way you're not feeling that compulsion to grab your phone all day. If this seems too radical for you, put it in a folder. Think out of sight, out of mind. And just, you know, I've got PDFs up here with all the tips if you don't want to be writing this down. 3, grayscale your phone. This one is one I hear from more people most often say, oh my God, this helps me so much. Just take the color off your phone because our brains are attracted to shiny objects. If you need help understanding this, think of birds. I know at my house, if every time there's a goldfish or cardinal, doesn't matter how many times per day, anytime it shows up, everyone's like, oh man, it's a goldfish, it's a cardinal. Never once I heard someone say, oh look, here's a sparrow. We're attracted to color. So grayscale your phone. Think out of sight, out of mind. If you're driving in your car, put your phone in your glove. Keep it in a purse. Keep it in a backpack. Just keep it out of your view. So you're just trying to build some resistance. You know, just so you can think twice. Do I really need to grab that phone? And maybe that resistance, having to reach for your phone, get it out of the glove compartment, that'll give you enough time to think, okay, maybe not. Conduct a time audit. You can't argue with facts. And that's what helped me. When also I saw where my time was going. Conduct a time audit. Download the blocking app. You can configure things. I have Freedom. It's phenomenal. I use it to I can right now. It's where I can just block off everything on the internet. I can program it for 2 hours, 2 minutes, 5 hours every day. And then you can also allow you can program it so you can allow different webs to have access during that blockage. Like when I'm not writing, the only website I can access is the source, just writing purposes. It's the only way I can get work done. I use Freedom. There's another great one called Forest, where it contributes money to the forest, National Forest Service. Wear a watch. Everyone uses their phones to check their time. And according to Wendy Wood, she's a professor at USC, when she wrote the book, Good Habits, Bad Habits, if you want to break a habit, willpower is not going to do it. You've got to break the cue, and our cue for checking our phones is habit variance. So if you're not picking up your phone to look at your the time instead of using a watch, you're breaking that cue. Empty your house and your phone not fully charged, it's pretty bad. But it makes you pretty damn judicial when how you use that phone. You really sweat, but it's like, wow, it really makes you think twice. Guilt yourself. My sister-in-law, she tells me, I love Facebook. It's great. I'm not telling you to get out, stay on it if you love it. But consider how much time you're spending. She spends over 2 hours per day. She wants to run a marathon. She's not spending any time running a marathon. So think of that. It's like, Joe, instead of spending 2 hours on Facebook, maybe just 1 hour, and then 1 hour towards running. So think of what is taken away from the other goals it's stopping you from. Scare yourself. By this, our average lifespan is 78 years old, 78 right now. And what I said earlier, we now spend 58 days per year on our devices. So if you're 28, that means 50 years from now, that's going to be 7.9 years of spending on your device. It's almost like lowering your life limit down, your lifespan down to 70. Or if you're 38 years old, it's 3 years on your phone. And of course, allow yourself to reboot. I mean, just unplugging, just getting outdoors, just putting your phone down. If you need some motivation for getting outside, think of the health benefits of your 30 minutes in a forest setting, lowers heart rates, blood pressure, reduces stress, boosts the immune system, and improves overall feelings of well-being. You don't even have to be doing anything, just sitting, just to be in a meadow, just to be in that calm setting. Think of all the benefits from that. And of course, Ralph Waldo Emerson said, in the woods is perpetual youth. This is my dad, 89 years old. Look, he's got a Bill Murray-esque smile on his face. He's not thinking about answering emails or texts, and a cancer's going to stop on his life. He's a kid again. And that's the power of the owl in the woods. And if I have to impart anything, it's like just know we are limited 1,440 minutes per day. That's it. It's a one-shot deal. We'll never get this time back. Life is so short. If we're lucky to live to 80 to 24,000 years on this planet, a third of which is spent sleeping. So just keep that in mind. It's like, oh my gosh, life is now. So ask yourself, do I really want to spend my time grabbing my phone, being distracted all the time, treating life like a cheap approximation? Or do you want to spend it being in the moment, being present, feeling so kick-ass alive? If you feel if you're spending your day dancing with nobody watching, and they aren't, because they're all on the screens. Folks, thank you very much. feel free to email me or check out my website if you have any questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That was awesome. And you know what? The other thing that I get always bombarded by is my watch. So I use my watch for fitness things, right? Because that's like, oh, I can check my steps or anything else. But it also connects me to my phone constantly. And Miranda, who's going to be our last speaker today, she actually one day came into work and says, I need a real watch. I need to get rid of this Apple Watch. And I still notice to this day she still wears her real watch and not her Apple Watch just to disconnect. So that's another thought. I was even saying back there, I could still use this for fitness, but not connect the notifications and everything through my watch that get me distracted. So thank you so much for all those suggestions. So we are going to take another 10-minute break for you here in person. There is a last call for breakfast. If you want to grab some breakfast, drinks, coffee. Our next speaker is Cheryl, and that'll be at 9:35, and her topic is Vital Signs, a 4-step approach to boosting organizational health before it's too late. So we'll see you here at 9:35.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next speaker. So over the last 30 years, Cheryl Abranovich has experienced every aspect of the world of health. Self-sufficient since she was 17, paying her way through school, Cheryl was the first person in her family to complete college, working full-time until she completed her bachelor's degree in nursing and a master's degree in public health. She's worked on the front lines as an emergency room nurse and life-saving healthcare provider. She's founded and sold 2 nationally recognized healthcare companies as an entrepreneur. She recently published her health-centric book, A Woman's Health Survival Guide. And today, Cheryl is one of the most trusted experts and innovators in the field of organizational health and peak performance, both at the individual level and in organizations of every size. In line with her belief to always, quote unquote, pay it forward, Cheryl has committed to donating all proceeds from her speaking engagements to book sales and board work to help support education for girls and women in need on their journey to personal health and personal success. So I'd like to introduce Cheryl, my colleague, my mentor, and my friend. Welcome.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Yeah. It is delightful for me to be here today. For everybody on the phone, hello. I hope that we can go through this next half an hour and provide some helpful information. And for everybody here, thank you for coming. Joanna, thank you for inviting me in. Pam, thanks for working on this over these past few months. It's been a joy to work with you on it. Again, as mentioned, I have had kind of a longer career. When I was listening to Brett earlier this morning speak, and he was talking about the different age groups, I was kind of chuckling, saying, I just turned 60 2 weeks ago. So I'm in that group that may not be on the chart anymore. But I have spent the last 35 years thinking about health and wellness. And as I was chatting with some of you, outside, hearing your passion for what you're doing, I think it's really important to maybe get a historical perspective, because when I started doing wellness programs, they didn't exist. And I was also a woman in business, which made it a little bit more challenging for a lot of us a few years ago in business. Is that good? Am I young? Okay, good.
You're
Thank
good.
you.
You're good.
Brittany's been very helpful. When I started my career, I was an emergency room nurse in a busy trauma center in Detroit, Michigan. And for me, I saw so many people that didn't need to be there. It was really kind of frustrating because, if you think about it, some people don't expect to go to the emergency room. A car accident, perhaps a gunshot wound, any accident can make somebody have that surprise visit to the ER. But what about the people that were there for their self-inflicted, uncontrollable lifestyle health issues? We saw lots of people who had strokes, who had heart attacks, who had uncontrollable diabetes, and the list goes on, because I know that in what you're thinking about, you think about those things too when you're trying to help it. It made me kind of sad, because I felt like, what could I do to be a little bit different, to get people to think about not coming to the emergency room, which wasn't very popular since I was a trauma nurse, right? We wanted to keep patients in, they had a job, but I really wanted to keep patients out. So I was a little bit ahead of myself. And what I really recognized was that there's this term, vital signs. And as a nurse, we know that vital signs are those measurements that we take, right, during a life-threatening emergency. Heart rate, blood pressure, respiration rate. We're looking at those things very specifically because we're really trying to understand what's going on with that person and how can we help them. What I realized over the last 30 years is that vital signs means a lot more than those measurements that we were taking when the person might be dying. We're getting vital signs every single day. And I think many of us choose to ignore them. And I think it's really important as I think about our group today, and I think about the people that you're trying to think about helping them change, that you consider yourself first. How many of us get health messages, but we ignore them? Things like having a headache, not sleeping, feeling tired. Yeah, you know, it's just been a rough week. I'm really busy, so I don't have time to think about it. And I think it kind of makes me sad because I think as health professionals, we first sometimes forget to take care of ourselves because you're working so hard to try to change everybody else. So as I'm speaking for this next 28 and a half minutes, I want you to think about how are you taking care of yourself? And of course, hopefully some of the things that I'll share, you can apply to how you're taking care of the people you're trying to change. The interesting thing about vital signs and health messages and health statistics is we really are struggling. I feel sad because I've been doing this for 35 years and I wish I could wave a wand and make everybody healthy and thinking about, taking better care of themselves. But the bottom line is it's not possible. Right now, we know that 14 out of 15 leading causes of death are related to lifestyle. And after listening to the presentation before, people are distracted. The 15th cause is because people have an accident, probably because they're distracted while they're driving. How is this helping us? Not very well. Right now, the Mayo Clinic estimates that 70% of all of our current health is related to the way that we live, not genetics. Yet less than 3% of people are actually living a healthy lifestyle. And we know that right now 60% of all people, of course not in this room, have some sort of chronic health condition. I had a patient when I was in the hospital working. His name was Bob. And I was in Detroit, Michigan. I won't name the company, but it was one of the world's largest traded companies. And he was a busy executive there. He was 53 years old. And when he came into the emergency room, he was really struggling. He was having a heart attack. He was in the trauma center, and we did everything that we could to try to help him. Medications, monitors, we had to try and do some emergency survival for him, more medications, contact his wife, try to get the family there as quickly as possible. And during this frenzy of activities, I noticed, and mind you, at that time I was in my 20s, I could see the tears and the look of fear on his face because he just hadn't taken the time to stop and think about his health before. And what was kind of interesting was I went over to him and I put my hand on his ear. And he kept whispering, "Tell her I'm sorry. Please, tell her I'm sorry because I just didn't listen." He died shortly thereafter. And as a young nurse working in the emergency room, I had to sit there with the doctor who had to explain to his wife, Carol, that it was too late. They tried everything. We tried everything we could to try to help. But the lifestyle choices that he had made had wreaked so much havoc on his body. It was just too late for us to do anything. It was ironic to me because during that time, I had explained to her his last words. And she then explained to me she had been trying for years to get Bob to listen. He was doing a great job at work. Very successful, probably felt like I had the job title, I'm making good money, I'm doing great. I'm never going to get sick. And he didn't listen to his vital signs. So what I learned during that time is that it's really important to try to help people understand what the reasons are to try and make some changes. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about that specifically. I mentioned earlier that vital signs aren't just the things that you do during a life-threatening emergency. Vital signs are really interconnected thoughts. And again, I realize I'm speaking to a choir. We can probably all sing it together. But I want you to think about it for a moment. We're really broken into two different parts. There's the physical side and there's the emotional side. What I'm so excited about our industry today is that there's a lot more emphasis placed on the emotional side, especially in the last few years. It greatly impacts how we feel physically. The two interconnected thoughts that can't be forgotten when you're implementing any sort of a wellness program. The other interesting thing that I've heard about vital signs over the years is that it affects every single aspect of our lives. If you don't feel good when you get up in the morning and you walk into work in that door, you don't instantly become a different person. The same person who doesn't feel good walks into the door. So if you can't really think about how you're taking care of yourself, it's going to affect everything. Everything we do. Our business, our family, all those important relationships that we have, the way that we interact in the community. Vital signs really matter. So I actually created this framework, this vital signs framework, and you probably say, okay, well, how can that help us? Well, first I'm going to say, as I'm describing it, I want you to think about the way you're currently taking care of yourself. If you've noticed, you've got headaches, I feel like I'm tired, I'm not feeling well, maybe I'm not relating to the people that I love in the way that I used to, I want you to stop and make sure that you are taking care of yourself. The second thing is, if you're doing that and feel pretty cool about that, I want you to think about how you can apply response to the programs that you're doing. So, you're probably wondering, why am I so passionate about this? And I did just turn 60, so don't worry, I won't go into crazy detail. Now my history is getting a little longer. I'll summarize it. But this was me when I was 4 years old. At the time, I thought it was kind of cute, right? Funny hair, with a cute face, I got by. You won't notice, but if you look really close, my right eye is extremely crossed. That was about the time that I realized that I was literally blind without glasses because I would be running around the corner and running into the wall because I thought it was there. And this is what happened. At 7, things changed a lot. For me, it was pretty tough and pretty drastic. I wore glasses. They were very thick. I had buck teeth. I was skinny as a rail. And it was not fun because kids could be crazy. And for me, it was also a little bit challenging because I was in a home where the kids really weren't bonded. And I'm going to share the story because I feel it's important for people to understand why have I spent the last 35 years trying to make a difference. And I want to also share that I know that every single person who's sitting here, who's on the phone, we all have our stories. We all have stuff that's happened to us. I'm not saying it because I want a pity party. I'm sharing it because I want you to understand how it changed the way I think and the way I get up every single day. So here's me. My parents were not around, and when they were around, it was pretty tough. I was the third mistake that they had made, and they let us know it every single day. When I was in school, kids would bully me, and when I was at home, I would just cry myself to sleep every night. As I grew up and I became a little bit older, at 12, my birthday present was finding out my parents were getting divorced. And in the 70s, you go with your mom because divorces weren't as common as they are today, and there was a thing called co-parenting. My mom never wanted kids, and she really struggled with her own issues, and she was never home. And it was very, very difficult for me because I was the last of the third mistake. And unfortunately, as we continued, at 17, I was homeless. I was completely on my own and greatly struggling emotionally, financially, and physically. I was very fortunate at that time to get enrolled in a program called Welfare to Work. it was pretty amazing because when you're living in a car and you're on your own and you don't really know where your next meal is coming from, having the ability to be able to get some food meant a lot. What was really cool for me was there was this counselor named Carol, and she said to me, you know, this is a welfare to work program. So if you want, you need to think about the vocation that you want to do. Nobody in my family ever went to college. We didn't talk about that. The first time that I actually went to a library, a public library, was in school when they were teaching us how to use the index cards, which is what they used in the old days. So for me, education sounded very different, and that sounded like a great opportunity. So I enrolled in the program, and I got my nurse's aide license, so like a vocational degree. And it was pretty cool. I was able to then go and work. I worked in a nursing home and home health care, and I loved nursing. I thought it was really fun because I really enjoyed helping people. And as I continued, I then decided I wanted to explore education. And I decided that I would go and try to get my LPN, which is a life and vocation degree. Move on a little bit more. Like I did that, I'm making a little bit more money now. I'm helping more people in a different way. What if I thought about getting my bachelor's degree? So I decided I would do that. I went out to school and I got my bachelor's degree in nursing. When I was a senior, and mind you, I was a little older of a student, it took me 7 years to do all the stuff I'm telling you. When I was a senior in school, things were starting to go pretty well for me. I had gotten rid of the bad relationships in my life. I was getting my education, and I was starting to feel a lot more confident in myself. Until that one day, kind of like Bob, that patient I was telling you about earlier, that did vital signs. I was working in the emergency room because I worked full time, and I also went to school full time. Didn't sleep a lot. And what was interesting was I was working, and I started to feel sick myself. I was getting sweaty. My heart rate was very tachycardic, very high, and I ended up passing out. I woke up the next day as a patient in the hospital that I worked at. And what I woke up as was a pretty sick person. I spoke to the doctors, and they said to me, you have a serious problem. You're 5'4", and you only weigh 83 pounds. Have you ever heard of anorexia? Well, that's what I had. And it was really hard for me. I knew it. I knew that before I had this episode, but I just kept ignoring the fact that that's what was wrong with me. Thought it'd go away. But it wasn't that easy. And they said to me, look, if you don't do something, you have a 10% chance of living. 10%. Which means you want to live, you're going to have to do a lot of work. They also told me I would most likely never have children because the damage I had done from the time that I was about 12 years old until the time that I was now 21 was pretty impactful. I decided at that moment I had two choices. I could live or I could die. And I chose, I'm here, right? I decided I wanted to try and go for it. I was going to try and make changes. And I needed to make all of them myself. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about. It was mind-blowing for me and game-changing for me to commit to living. And I really feel like I got a second chance of life. And I was able to graduate with my bachelor's degree. I actually, just so that you know how I was able to overcome this, I spent 3.5 months as an inpatient in an eating disorder program in Michigan. And after that, I spent 2 years every single week driving to counseling to work through those issues. I had some serious vital signs I didn't listen to. But once I listened to them, it was a game changer for me. And I've applied what I learned in that program for the rest of my life. And I'm telling you, it absolutely has worked for me. So I spent the last 35 years trying to get all the clients, my teammates, and people that I work with to be just as excited about it as I've been. So I'm happy that I get to share this with you. It's impacted me physically in a great way. I'm 60 years old. I love mountain biking, I love hiking, I'm outdoors all the time. I think it's super helpful and important for our health. I'm the healthiest I've been in my whole life. Emotionally, when I get upset or something's not right, I have a conversation, I work through it. I have tools that I can use to really help me address the situation in a positive way. I have a family, and my relationships are really a different one because I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. If I didn't take the time to learn how to not make that happen again and have it repeat itself, then I wouldn't have been able to do that either. And then in business, it's helped me tremendously because I've been able to really spend the time focusing on taking care of the teammates that we created with the companies I've started, and also to be able to make sure we're doing a great job with our clients. So I wanted to just share, I've been blessed. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to have worked with so many cool clients. The first company I had was an executive health coaching company. The second, which I sold to a health system, and the second company that I started was called WellCore, and it actually was a company years ago that did corporate health promotion programs. And those are some of the clients that we had. We specialized in multi-site programming, and we reached about 20 million employees in the globe. But the most important thing for me was my family. I was told I had a 10% chance of living. I'd never, most likely, ever have kids. Those two guys, that handsome guy is my husband and my best friend for the past 34 years. The two young men are my sons. We have 2 daughters-in-law, and we have a grandson in January, which I'm like super excited about. So I'm saying this because I got a second chance. I'm grateful for the second chance that I got. And people who know me laugh because it's morning time for Cheryl, but I jump out of bed. I'm excited to get going and try to share what I've learned with so many. And I know that everybody here in the room today also has a passion. You have a story. You have a reason why you're sitting in this conference or you're on the phone at home watching. It's important to find out what made you motivated and to be able to take that passion when you're feeling like you can't, why am I doing this? I'm so frustrated about this and I need to make a difference. Know that you're making a difference because that person, Carol, in the welfare and support program, actually took some time to listen to me and encourage me to get my education. And then the doctors who said to me, if you don't change what you're doing now, you're not going to be here next year. Those people made a difference in my life. You all are making a difference in people's lives. And it matters. Every conversation that you have, we try to have people think about taking better care of themselves. How we doing? I think we're good. Oh, perfect. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to quickly walk through the 4 steps that I've used pretty much in most things and decisions that I've made, whether it's at home, my health, or my businesses. The first is to get the tattoo. I believe that, does anybody here have a tattoo that wants to share? You don't have to show your tattoo, just raise your hand if you have a tattoo. Oh, cool. All right, see, you are going to. What's kind of neat about the tattoo, and also I see a tattoo, perfect. I interviewed hundreds of people around the world to find out why would you get a tattoo? What motivated you? What was it? It was the commitment. The things that people are willing to have tattooed on their body means something to them. I would love if we thought about our health in the same way. Your health really matters, right? So if you can commit to one thing to improve your health, that can be just life-changing for you. And it's similar to getting a tattoo. In my opinion, you can't usually eliminate your tattoo once you get them. The tattoo of one of the people, and it's a mom tattoo. Again, it was good because he was married a couple of times, but his mom was okay because she was always on his arm. The second one is pack your map and compass. I also love the outdoors, and I love outside, and I think it's very nice for people to really get connected with nature. We begin there and we end there. So it's nice to be there in the middle. But packing your map and compass, I believe, is extremely important because you have to have a plan. All of us, when we're working, usually have a plan of what we're doing. We make appointments, we have a project, we have meetings, we kind of plan out every single aspect to achieve our goal. If we use the same logic of planning when it comes to taking care of our health, it'd probably be a lot easier to accomplish goals. For example, I want to move more. Great. So how are you going to do it? I don't know. I'm thinking about it. Okay, that's too big. I want to move more. What if you bought a pair of tennis shoes and you or walking shoes and you put it by your door? What if you put it on your calendar and you made sure that you did it? For years, I love to exercise to make me feel better, but I also know it makes me feel mentally better. So I put it on my calendar, just like an appointment that's not going away. And anybody who knows me knows that that's the time that, unless it's something really urgent and dire, I'm not changing that because that's for my personal wellness. It'll make me happier person to be around after that. The compass is if you get a little off track. We have this annoying person inside of us. Some of us do. Does any of you have a little inner critic that picks on you because you just didn't do it well enough? Tell that person to shut up because the inner critic isn't helpful for you. If your best friends talk to us or talk to you, sometimes the way that our inner critic allows us to be talked to, you wouldn't be friends with them. So you have to treat yourself like your best friend. And your compass is just to help you remind yourself that you have to impact that. So pack your map, have a plan, and if you get off track, don't beat yourself up for it. Use your compass to get yourself back on track. And I'm gonna be time conscious because Sam's pulling the watch up in the back. I'm just kidding, but I'll continue here. The third step is to assemble your board of directors. Now, when we think of most companies, we know that many of them, great organizations, nonprofits, have a board of directors or advisors. Super helpful. We also know that when we're born, we don't come with a specific set of actions that we're going to do or instructions. We're really formed by our environments and the people around us, right? I mean, if you think about it. If you don't get yourself out of that environment, it's very difficult to succeed. Case in point, myself, right? So I want you to think about your phone, even though we're not supposed to think about our phones too much. Don't look at your phone now. And I want you to think about the fact that you probably have people that you regularly text, you regularly call. Those are the folks that you lean into. Could they be your board of directors? Are they the people that are there for you, like a board of directors, to make you accountable, to help you be responsible, to help you when you need to lean in to get some help? A board of directors is really important for any health change, for anything that you really want to be able to do. And I wanted to just share that those are two of my board of directors. That is me in the middle with a cool headband. But the board of directors for me were Susan and Debbie. They were my college roommates, also nurses today. I'm still friends with them. And they, every single day I was in the hospital for that 3 months, made sure they called me, sent me cards, came and visited me. They were there for me. They helped me lean in when I had left the hospital. It was not an easy transition. And they were super helpful for me during that process. Over the years, my board of directors has changed, of course, but it's nice to know that when you're trying to make a change or if you are trying to institute some sort of change, that you really incorporate that logic. So who's on your board of directors? Now, I want us to think about something. Think about the first time you did any of these things. Rode a bike, your first date, gave a speech, made a recipe, drove a car, used a smartphone, your first kiss, babysat. How did it feel the first time you did that to now? Probably a little bit different, right? It's kind of funny if you think about the first time you did some of those things. So that brings us to the last step, which is called dance the tango. If you've ever watched professional dancers dance the tango, you know that it is not an easy process. They practice and practice and practice. It's no different than if you are doing something to change your health. In Atomic Habits, James Clear talked about the fact that 47% of what we do is not an exercise. It just happens. We don't even think about it. If you're automatically making the wrong choices, it's difficult to get out of that if you don't practice doing something different. So, when you dance the tango, you also have to make it fun. So that's really important. My phone is ringing and I'm going to ignore it because I don't know how to shut it off. So I'm going to watch it. Sorry about that. So, very quickly to wrap up, 1, get the tattoo. What health behaviors are you so passionate about impacting that you would consider tattooing on your body? Packing your map and compass. What do you typically do to stay on track? And how are you going to do that? Assembling your board of directors. Who can you actually count on to respond in a crisis? And then finally, dancing the tango. Can you be okay with awkward and uncomfortable to get to the goal that you actually want? It's really important to be able to do that. And also remember to, your inner critic, put that person away. So in keeping with the time that we were hoping for, I'm going to wrap it up. I would also love if you have any questions, and I know we don't have time to ask them now, so please email me. My email is listed, and also link in with me. I would love to have a chance to be able to connect. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Pam, and thank you, everyone.
Now we're in progress. So sorry
Wonderful.
we all missed the intro.
No worries. Good morning, everybody. This presentation is titled Healing the Workplace and Workforce. Solutions, I'm going to be talking about that a lot. Solutions for the growing crisis in substance misuse. Our panel today is made up of Cheryl Brown Merriweather, Julie Dostal, and Dr. Brandy Izquierdo. And I am your moderator, Dr. Joel Bennett. I'm going to start off here by mentioning some key points of these solutions before we get started as a learning device. Cheryl is going to talk about considering both traditional and new human resource solutions and use of formal roles of facilitators, coaches, champions, and peer support professionals, recovery specialists. Julie's going to be talking about use of capacity building, needs assessment, and the delivery of evidence-based curriculum. And Brandy's going to talk about taking simple steps, no shame pledge, toolkits, use of Narcan on the website, and providing a treatment locator. So this is a range of solutions that you're going to be hearing about. There's something for everyone. Why? The workplace of the future needs as much of this as possible. We are in a very critical situation, but without further ado, I will let Cheryl explain that. Cheryl Brown Merriweather brings over 2 decades of experience in corporate HR management, addiction recovery awareness, and adult education to her role as Vice President and Executive Director of the International Center for Addiction and Recovery Education, otherwise known as iCare, and she'll talk about that. She is also the current 2-term president of the Greater Orlando Society for Human Resource Management. She's an active board member of Project Opioid and a former adjunct faculty member at the University of Phoenix. Take it away, Cheryl.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. You know, a few days ago, I saw the results of a survey conducted by CNN and the Kaiser Family Foundation that said 90% of adults believe there is a mental health crisis in the country today. Now, clinically speaking, mental health and substance use disorder are co-occurring. And because the workplace is a microcosm of society at large, these issues do impact the workforce and by extension, the direct and indirect costs impact both individual lives and corporate bottom lines. Next slide, Joel. Thank you. The problems are not new to the workplace, but since the onset of COVID-19, the scope of the problem has increased exponentially. Countless articles have been written about what is being called the pandemic within the pandemic. And as alarming as the numbers are, for example, 107,000 overdose deaths in 1 year, the data are largely lagging indicators. And that means that we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg now. Next slide, Joel. Thank you. Research tells us that 1 in 4 remote workers have been diagnosed with mental health disorder. The same percentage of workers whose jobs were labeled essential during the pandemic said they worked while impaired with alcohol or drugs. And that 70% number of illicit drug users that were employed or are employed, that number was documented prior to what is now the nationwide legalization of marijuana movement. So because substance misuse and addiction are not typically subjects that we talk about in the workplace, where can people who are struggling either personally or who have loved ones, family members, friends, co-workers, or even folks who are just curious about the topic, and where can they turn to get help? Do you know it is estimated that only somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 7% of people who actually need and want help will actually seek that help through their company-sponsored EAP programs. Next slide. Thank you. Let me tell you just a brief moment about Donna. So Donna can be one of your company's superstar employees. She's also a single mom with 2 young kids. Donna works remotely, and she was trying to go to school to improve her life until the pandemic hit. She couldn't help the kids with their schoolwork and keep up with her own schoolwork at the same time. Donna lost her dad in the early stages of the COVID pandemic, and her ex-husband, well, he recently lost his job, and he was already getting behind on the child support payments. And now the landlord sent her a message and said, oh, by the way, we're going to raise your rent about $400 a month. So for the most part, no one from Donna's job has a clue about what's going on with her in her life. No one would imagine that she's using alcohol, maybe a little marijuana that she gets from her brother every once in a while, and sleeping pills just to cope. And because of the fear and the shame and the stigma associated with substance misuse, she feels she has nowhere to turn. Joel? So now let's just play a little game of what if. What if Donna's alcohol and substance misuse started to get just a little bit out of control? What if her work performance started to suffer in some significant way? What would a typical HR response look like? Well, the recommended best practices are shown on this slide here. Substance misuse typically falls under the category of risk management in the workplace. So the practices shown here are time tested. They're highly recommended. These are not bad things, but notice, if you will, what they all have in common. These things, these practices are largely employed reactively. They're not done proactively. They only come into play after someone crashes and burns. It's a phrase that I use, sadly. Next slide. So by now perhaps I've done a pretty good job of painting a gloomy picture of the scope and the challenge that exists in the workplace. So now I'm going to put on a different hat and let you know that there really are some cool, some new, some exciting initiatives that are popping up in the workplace all over the country. I've listed some of them here. These approaches are as diverse as the companies themselves are that are starting to use them, yet they all have some things in common. First of all, these efforts, they have to be company sanctioned, and primarily they're led by employees who may themselves be what we like to call recovery champions or peer supporters. Peers are defined as people with lived experience, either having lived through mental health issues or substance misuse issues for themselves or a family member. I have the honor of working every day with some of these folks, and they're getting the approval of their HR departments, their diversity and wellness leaders inside their companies. They're forming affinity groups under the DE&I umbrella. They're leading Dry January and Sober September and other Sober Curious events. They're connecting with allies. They're partnering with health and wellness and EAP and other groups both inside and outside of the company in the larger community. Together, these folks are striving to create psychologically safe workplace cultures that are recovery ready, recovery supportive, and recovery friendly. Next slide, Joel. So the last thing for me is this, because my company, iCare, the International Center for Addiction and Recovery Education, we believe that people live and they perform best when they are not plagued by substance misuse or addiction. So we train and certify non-clinical, I'll repeat that, non-clinical professional recovery coaches and addiction awareness facilitators. And these folks work proactively, not reactively. They complement and supplement other existing services, but they primarily focus on working proactively in the workplace to raise awareness about substance misuse and addictive behavior. These coaches, the facilitators, they are skilled at using these new approaches that you're going to hear more about from the following panelists. They work in combination with existing best practices and workplace protocols, those HR things that I mentioned previously, the traditional stuff, the new and the traditional, we're working together. They're bringing these solutions, these approaches together to create what Joel mentioned as the workplace of the future. And since 2013, together we've trained more than 1,000 coaches and facilitators, not only from across the USA, but from more than 40 nations around the world. So I'm very excited to share more with you about that. Just reach out if that's something you want to know more about. And that concludes my presentation, Joel.
That's wonderful, Cheryl. And you'll notice in the chat box, you can see the contact information for Cheryl. We'll be sharing contact information for everyone as we wrap up here. I'm very, very excited about peer-based, ambassador-based, champion-based, advocate-based, allied-based programs that involve lived experience. And Cheryl's program is a very structured program, and there are many others out there. So this part of the presentation just is opening up the aperture that one of the solutions is peer support. Okay, so moving along to, and every solution you're going to hear about today is complementary. I have had a great opportunity to work with all of our panelists today, and everyone is contributing something special. And I am happy to say that here is somebody very special to me. Julie Dostal is the Executive Director of the Leaf Council on Alcoholism and Addictions. They're in Oneonta, New York. She's been in the field of substance use prevention for more than 25 years. Ms. Dostal strongly believes in communities as a driving force for positive change, and you'll hear that in this presentation. She's a sought-after speaker who frequently shares her enthusiasm, knowledge, and expertise at local, state, national, and international events. Julie is currently the prevention lead for her state, which is New York, the region's state opioid response. These are called the SOR grants that are around the country. And this SOAR project has a focus on integrating substance use prevention through workplace well-being. So this is wonderful to have the integration of workplace wellness and well-being with substance use prevention. Without further ado, please welcome Julie Dostal.
Good morning, and thank you, Joel. Hello to everyone from gorgeous upstate rural New York. I'm super glad to be here this morning. And I just want to start by letting you know why this work is so very important to me and why it resonates with me so deeply. I'm a woman in long-term recovery. I found and fumbled and fell my way into recovery about 30 years ago. And don't do the math, please. And what happened for me is very early in my recovery, literally at 4 months sober, a workplace took a chance on me. And they took a chance on me and gave me a job in the addiction space. I kind of wasn't expecting that. That's not really what I thought I was going to be doing for the rest of my life, but hey, here I am, and that's okay. So with that, as a woman in recovery, I embraced that opportunity with very much gratitude. I was grateful to have it. I was grateful to be there and to be doing this work, and have continued to do it for some time. And now I get to do some leading, conducting the train, so train wreck to conductor, and continue to do this work. And I'm now in upstate New York doing this work. Next slide. Let me tell you a little bit about kind of the background of prevention. I'm a preventionist. I've been a preventionist for a very long time. That is the focus of my work. Historically, prevention has focused on direct services for youth, families, communities, as well as trying to work on population level health with laws and policies and norms. Recently, prevention has started to address additional populations, additional focuses with prevention across the lifespan. So just think of this. I wrote a little note at the bottom of the slide. When we do public health work, we don't stop prevention when people hit 12th grade. We just don't do that. We don't say, oh, 12th graders, you've learned everything you need to know, go and do your life. We do diabetes prevention, heart disease prevention, hypertension prevention. We do all of that for the lifespan. It now makes perfect sense to do substance misuse prevention across the lifespan. Next. And with that, what we know is we need to work in the workforce with the workplace. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this backdrop of this work that we've been doing. I'm really focusing on the rural population. We've done some capacity building. We've talked to leaders. We've talked to business owners. And what we know about working in rural populations is small is really small and far is really far, because most of the areas, as you can see on this map of the middle of upstate New York, most areas have less than 25 people per mile. Most businesses that we've talked to had less than 100 employees. As a matter of fact, you can see from our capacity building, it was 58% of the businesses had less than 100 employees. And that little line, that 3 hours, is how long it takes to drive from one part of our catchment area to the other part of our catchment area. It's a long way. So next slide. What we did in looking at the rural workforce is we first needed to ask, what do you need? What's going on? We didn't want to go in and kind of have our hands on our hips and say, we're here to help. What we wanted to do is say, what's going on in your workplace? How can we help? So we did a needs assessment. We did stakeholder interviews. We did focus groups. We put out a survey. And in doing that, we were able to do some capacity building and build relationships. In rural areas in particular, relationships is everybody. There's no such thing as 6 degrees of separation in rural America. There's maybe 2 degrees of separation on a good day. So making relationships is incredibly important, which actually requires lots of coffee. We sit down and we have a conversation and we talk and we find out what's going on. We go back and forth about what they need and what they see. And here's what we learned. Next slide. Managers told us, so we talked with managers and supervisors and CEOs, and what we found out is they spend an average, now I want to say an average of 38% of their time. It went up as high as some managers and leaders telling us 70%. They spend an average of their time dealing with employee stress, burnout, mental health, lack of sleep, fatigue, general health, alcohol misuse, and other drug misuse. And what we've done is we've looked at those data. Next slide. We've looked at those data and we found out that not only is there a human cost, and there truly, truly is a human cost, but we worked with Dr. Bennett, and him and some of his team did some econometric studies around the data that we collected. And what we find is that in small businesses, that under 100, where most of our businesses are, the small businesses, the manager, $25,000 of their time is spent helping to manage employee stress, burnout, mental health, substance use. For the employee, their productivity costs each business an average of $108,000. Now, when you look at the larger companies, above 100 and above, so that's medium and large companies, what we found is that for each manager, there was an average of $41,000 of their productivity time spent toward managing employee struggles. And the employee productivity costs at a very real $3.4 million. And this is the sample size that we got. And you can see at the bottom the reference there to the study that was done. Next slide, please. So what did our friends, say our new friends, we went out and we built relationships, we had coffee. What did our new friends say that they needed? Well, under the general well-being, what they said was they needed communication, team building, soft skill development. They said they needed positive resilience and thriving training. They said their managers needed stress training. And on the substance use prevention intervention side, what they said they needed was educational health and consciousness training. They needed Narcan on site and people trained to deliver Narcan. They said and this connects to my co-presenters, they said they also would love to have peer recovery specialists on site. How awesome would that be to have peer recovery specialists integrated into the workplace? Next, please. So what we did was we took all of this information and and worked with Dr. Bennett to help adapt the evidence-based workforce intervention called Team Awareness. It's a wonderful, wonderful training. He helped us to adapt it. And now it addresses both general well-being, it addresses substance use prevention, and we are delivering this training. Dr. Bennett drew the circle for me in those areas of New York State that we went out and had these conversations with. And next slide. And in our early implementation of this adapted evidence-based program, the adaptations that we did through capacity building and assessment, we are already seeing an awesome response from our workplaces. We are seeing an increase in healthy coping, an increase in overall team resilience in the workplace, and an increase in being able to contribute to the well-being of other people in their life. So this is great work. It is fun work. And working in the rural community is a really special thing. And also, I would like to add that these types of interventions and adaptive interventions will clearly work in urban populations and suburban populations as well. Thank you very much. Joel, back to you.
Amazing, amazing, wonderful work. So as before, you'll see contact information for Julie in the chat box. Also, we will put into the chat box some of the research that we've been doing. We just had an article published yesterday in HR News. And so look for those links as well if you want to learn more about the evidence-based nature of this work. So more is coming. We're not done. It blows my mind to have the opportunity to present everybody here today. I have had a wonderful time working with the SAFE project, Stop the Addiction Fatality Epidemic, and it is a real honor to introduce Dr. Brandy Izquierdo, who is the executive director of the SAFE project. Her drive and determination, you'll hear all about it here, are built on making an impact within behavioral health, promoting long-term recovery, and ensuring communities are educated and have the tools necessary to combat the epidemic, the addiction epidemic, the one epidemic that we're all here to talk about today. She leads advocacy efforts to expand access to behavioral health services and recovery support services. She and SAFE Project provide technical assistance both nationally and internationally. There's so many tools that the SAFE Project has, and it's all about empowering others within the recovery movement. So I'm so excited to welcome Brandy today. Brandy, it's your show.
Thank you, Joel. And Julie, if I were closer to you, I would definitely, coffee is key. And I apologize if my voice is going in and out. I am working through a respiratory infection, but that's okay. We still show up today, and that's the beauty of recovery, right? We learn to show up. We learn to bring ourselves to the forefront and really adhere to our commitments. So I appreciate that. As Julie, Julie, I really appreciate you sharing the fact that you are a person in recovery. I too am a person in recovery. And Cheryl was talking a little bit earlier about Donna and all of the stuff, the messy stuff that was happening behind the scenes with Donna. And it really just came to me that, I am Donna. I was Donna. I was that person that, maybe dibbled and dabbled in what Joel talks about as addiction, the taboo subject that we never want to talk about in the workplace, right? And I dibbled and dabbled, and then it came to a point where there were circumstances, many of which were beyond my control, that really led to the fueling of my addiction, and it became intensive, it became impulsive, and then it just blindsided me and hit me in the face. I can tell you firsthand, addiction was not a career move for me. I was a person in active use who was in the corporate world. So I was that employee where there were many times and many opportunities for interception. And it was unfortunate that my colleagues, my coworkers, my friends did not have the tools, the resources, and the solutions to help navigate me through. And as you can see, we always talk about statistics and the numbers and the people, but putting a face to that, I actually found myself in jails and institutions. And I just want to put that out there, that where I was then is not where I am now, but it's been a real journey. Next slide. So I really want to put this into context. I know that we talk about the numbers. Over 107,000 people have lost their lives to overdose. Quite often we talk about overdose in terms of opioid use disorder and overdose with opioids. And, really making it relevant here is 295 people, but those people aren't just numbers. They're friends, they're colleagues, they're coworkers, they're family members. And we need to remember that every single day someone is dying or struggling with a substance use disorder. I also want to make sure that everyone understands that addiction needs to really take a look at a broader scope and totality. We know that there's a lot of conversation around fentanyl, opioid use disorder, prescription use, all of that. But we also have to understand that addiction comes in many forms, and there's poly use, methamphetamine, cocaine. We see that a lot in the restaurant industries when people are trying to stay up and abreast of what's happening in their workplace. And focusing not only on the fatal overdoses, but the non-fatal overdoses. And I know that can be daunting, but it also can generate opportunity. And Cheryl spoke a little bit earlier about the 23 million Americans who have been diagnosed with a substance use disorder. To counter that, though, there are also 23 million, or at least over 23 million Americans who also identify as being in recovery. And we have to have that conversation because individuals with substance use disorder who identify really struggle with complexity in terms of stigma, but more importantly, discriminatory practices, especially in the workplace. Next slide. You know, when I talk to employers and employees, you know, the first thing is this is a me issue. This is a personal issue. This is not a we issue. I beg to differ. This is actually a we issue. Cheryl mentioned earlier that over 70% are employed. I can tell you firsthand, I was one of those that was employed. I have friends and colleagues who are still in active addiction who are employed. Not only that, we also have to understand too that addiction is a family disease. This isn't just about me as a person and what my struggles are, but it's also about my family members or my family members who are going through that struggle as well. And of those employees, 42% of them admit to being less productive or distracted at work because they have substance use disorder in their families. But interestingly enough, 95% of people who may have a substance use disorder don't perceive that they need help. That becomes a serious issue because we feel the shame and stigma associated with that. And only 10% of those who recognize that they may need help actually get that help. And again, the question comes, why? Well, it's all stigma. Stigma doesn't stop at the door. Just because we're trained in stigma or we're trained in terms of substance use disorder and mental health conditions does not necessarily mean that it stops at the door. Next slide. Studies have shown that public stigma can lead to discriminatory practices in the workplace. We're seeing that a lot in terms of the Department of Justice coming down and holding workplaces accountable through the American Disability Act based on substance use disorder. And we're also finding that people who self-identify as having a substance use disorder do experience discrimination in the workplace, and they have lower acceptance among colleagues. This is microaggression, micro-insult, and there are layers and complexities associated with stigma. And it starts with the public, and then from there leads into systemic, and then from there self-stigma and the shame and the internalization that we feel as a community. So we have to learn to have those conversations, those candid, deep conversations. And sometimes it's through a cup of coffee, right? A cup of coffee can really bring people together. Next slide. The addiction epidemic, you know, we talk about that from a public health crisis perspective. It's a personal issue. It's not a workplace issue, right? Well, that's wrong. It is a workplace issue. It is a community issue. It's a national and international issue that we need to bring to the forefront. However you connect with that. For me, it's personal. For me, it's entwined in everything I do. For some, it may be based on the bottom line and what it costs to the employer. You see here that cost to the employer can be based on fatalities, accidents, workman's compensation, medical costs, absenteeism, productivity, theft. So we know that in order for us to create healthy workplaces, we need to pull back and really start creating healthy employees. And that then will fuel the healthy organizations, which will generate and cultivate safe spaces and healthy workplaces. Next slide. Cheryl mentioned earlier too, obviously we're working on solutions-focused approaches, right? Our department, our Secretary of Labor is actually someone that speaks out about his recovery. And we're finding what I don't like to call a trend, but just this new movement happening in the workplace, and it's the recovery-friendly workplace. But what's interesting about that is you have to make sure that you have a recovery-ready workplace that is fueled and making sure that you have a recovery-supportive workplace. And then from there, it becomes a recovery-friendly workplace where we can normalize these conversations and sit down and talk about our struggles and our trials and tribulations, but also our triumphs with our colleagues and our coworkers and our management. What's also interesting, I can tell you firsthand for being someone in recovery, just like Julie mentioning, I was so grateful that someone gave me a chance and an opportunity after I entered the journey of recovery, that I was willing to show up and show out in any way I possibly could. And I still do that to this day. You know, I show up for my commitments. And what we're finding now with the research is that people in recovery miss 13.7 fewer days than those who are not treated for their substance use disorder, and 3.6 less days than your average employee. You know, and if we want to look at the bottom line, when we're talking about turnover, replacement, healthcare costs, we're avoiding over $8,000 per person that we invested. And I think we need to understand that, you know, we invest in people, they invest in us. It's all about reciprocity and caring about the individual and being compassionate and empathetic in that workplace. We spend most of our time working. For us to silo or compartmentalize what's happening, it can't be to create that safe space. So it's important for us to take simple steps to move to a safe workplace and a safe environment. And that includes recognizing the impact of drug misuse, educating and engaging the workforce on a consistent basis, enacting policies that are conducive to a safe environment and a recovery-friendly workplace. Always training your supervisors and your employees, specifically your employees, because they're your first responders, and what the use of drugs or impairment look like in that workspace. And equity. I hear a lot of top-heavy conversations on mental health, but we need to create equity in terms of coverage for substance use disorder. And then obviously the leveraging of the employee assistance program, making sure your employees know that it's there and it's available and how to access it. Because sending the right cultural signals is key. The more we send those cultural signals, the more likely people are to step up and step out and say, hey, I'm struggling, I need help. Next slide. And Joel mentioned solutions. It's all about solutions. There's simple steps that you can take. I like to call it the Monty Hall approach. Door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3. Maybe I'm aging myself too, Julie, right? But it's also important, if we're not ready to have the full-blown conversation about putting Narcan in your workplace, perhaps starting off by having a no shame toolkit or signs that there's no shame in getting help and addiction is a disease. Making sure your employees and your supervisors have access to the treatment locator, where if an individual says, hey, maybe I need help, you actually have a resource that can be handed over. And I can tell you firsthand from my personal experience, had I had some of that and there was a cultivated safe space, perhaps I would have reached out sooner and my journey would have began a little bit sooner. So I think it's really important for us to not only talk about the problem and the taboo subject, but come with solutions and a solutions-focused approach. And I am truly honored to be on the panel with some heavy hitters who are really passionate and compassionate and empathetic about this space. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Joel.
Wonderful. Well, I am so excited to have everyone here today listen to these very powerful ladies. I cannot tell you, this is not just something they cooked up because of the COVID epidemic. They've been working on this for years, lots of wisdom, lots of depth, and lots of approaches that really work. And if we're going to move ahead, we really need to embrace prevention of substance use. This is what we need for the future. So just to recap, remember what Cheryl talked about, focus on peer support. Julie talked about the systematic capacity building work that makes this take in a rural community, a suburban community, to adapt evidence-based tools. And then Brandy talked about simple steps to make sure that people in recovery are heard, are included, and contribute. Here's how you can reach everybody. Again, this information has been available in the chat box. I'm so excited to, again, have Joanna and Wellness 360 have us at the table. Please please reach out to any and all of us if you want to start being part of this positive, proof-based solution or any of the solutions that you heard today. I think that's all. I think that other information is in the chat box. You could also reach out to Gina Reardon from the SAFE Project, who's specifically working in the Safe Workplace project area. So I'll turn it to you now. I guess, does that go back to you, Joanna?
It sure does. Yep. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And thank you also your panel. That was a great recap. So again, thanks for having us. Yeah. What's that? It is. Yeah. Okay. So we are going to take a quick 5-minute break, and our next speaker is coming up, and that topic is, do you really have a safe environment? And for those who are here, did you remember to scan for your digital code when you checked in? Just another reminder, there's the QR code, that's your digital brochure. And it has also your completion certificate in that brochure, and it also has all the contact information for our speakers are in that brochure. So this is out front, or you can kind of come up here and scan that too. Thank you. We'll be ready in 5.
Okay, so in the interest of time, we'll get back right into it, and we'll start with our next speaker. Scott Warwick is of Human Resource Consulting and Employment Law Services, and asks these pointed questions to us. Do you think you have a safe environment? Is it safe from germs? Is it safe to be different, whether you're black, white, homosexual, or so on? Is it safe to disagree with a coworker or supervisor? How should you define trust? Why is a safe environment and trust your highest #1 priority in attracting and retaining employees? Scott will show us why adopting a safe environment and trust are vital to our organizations and how to do it in his own practical and entertaining style. Without further ado, welcome to Scott.
Okay, good. Yeah, still morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Warwick, and we're going to take a real quick look at creating a safe environment. Now, just to sort of elaborate, I've been in human resources for 40 years. Okay? Anybody here born after 1983? Boy, what an experienced group. Usually I get 40 years, and I've been a practicing employment attorney for 26. All right. I'm also a recovering post-traumatic stress disorder survivor, and my story is a little different because I started researching this stuff on my own because the information I was getting from my psychiatrists and everyone was just plain wrong. And at the same time, I have a son that has Asperger's syndrome, autism, and they told us that's just the way he is. That medication is all you got. He might not graduate, might not go to college, so this was devastating. So I did my own research. And the research that I've discovered in the last 20 years, which is all from the neuroscientists, not from the medical profession, just blew my mind. So, oh no, now here we go. Okay. Now it won't work. Huh? Will that unfreeze it? It's not moving at all now. Okay, now. Okay, there we go. Okay, it just froze up there. Is it safe? Is it safe? Now, such a simple concept. Anybody recognize the cartoon guy? Underdog, yeah, okay. Little guy to save the day. Okay, takes a little pill of cocaine from his ring, and that's what he does. All right? Now, how many people here have safety programs back at the ranch? See? You understand safety and health. Safety and health. How many people realize we had a pandemic in the last couple of years? Okay, you have programs for germs? Okay, I always love this because we didn't pay any attention to the health stuff for years. It was OSHA, Occupational Safety Health Association, or whatever, administration. Let me ask you, is it safe for you to go to work that you're not going to destroy your back or lose your fingers or go home alive? How many people have security back at the ranch? You ain't got a button. Why is that? Why don't you just open it so they go through? Oh my gosh. How many people, you would not be that surprised to find out, maybe if you look at your phone after we're done here today, that there's been a mass shooting in the United States. Would that surprise you? Okay, in the good old days, 5 years ago, did that surprise you? Oh, yeah. Does that tell you something about our mental health? It's going down the toilet. Okay? So, is it safe from germs? That's your safety program. Of course it is. All right? It's all the same thing. Now, here's the big kicker. Is it safe to be different? Is it safe to be white? Is it safe to be black? Is it safe to be Jewish? Oh, here's a good one. We got a brand new protected class a couple years ago from the United States Supreme Court. Is it safe to be transgender in your organization? Today's Friday, right? So Bob comes into work today and he hears it. Hey, this is a protected class, cross-dressing or transgender. So he goes out and gets himself all prettied up over the weekend, buys himself a really nice wig, gets press-on nails, if they still do that. I don't know if they still do that. You got fake nails, okay? He's got eyeshadow. Bob comes in Monday, and Bob now wants to be called Betty. All right, tell me, is there someone somewhere in your organization who's going to pick on Betty? That you do not have a safe environment. And I'll tell you right now, is that going to make Betty's gut rumble? We're going to talk a lot about this distress. Cortisol adrenaline is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about distress, okay? And so when you flood your body with cortisol and adrenaline, massive amounts of it, that is your number one health threat. Number one, worse than smoking. And what we've learned in the last 20 years about your brain and distress, my job is to scare the hell out of you. Because I'll tell you right now, how many people, you've tried to put tolerance programs in place and you just can't get by. You got that? Nah, it doesn't apply to me. Really? You want Alzheimer's? Do you want depression? Do you want post-traumatic stress disorder like I have? Let me clue you in here. If you have an intolerant environment full of emotional children, you will develop a mental disorder. And I love these statistics because you don't really know how many people are on psychotropic medications, right? Because that's HIPAA information and things. So how do they know? You want a realistic stat? Look at the public sector, state and feds, because that's a public record. What percentage, let's just take Ohio, what percentage of all the employees in the state of Ohio who are in the public sector, state, local, municipality, county, 75 to 80% of all of them are on psychiatric medications. What does that tell you? That's probably a reflection of what's really going on. Most people who you know that have prescription coverage have a mental disorder. So I'll tell you, I just finished coming back from Denver. They couldn't get their harassment and bullying under control, which is diversity. So I spent the last week, I'm going to spend 2 more weeks in November talking to shop floor employees. 90-some% of everybody in that organization is on psychiatric medications, and they did it to themselves. You hear me? I'll tell you right now. I mean, did you think this was a nice, fuzzy, feel-good comment? But it is always all cuddly. Anybody know any good cuddly labor attorneys? Good God, I'm used to dealing with Teamsters. Are you kidding me? So I'll tell you, you market. Oh, I love the next section. It's going to be on marketing. You market safety. Is it safe? Is it safe? Who's ever worked someplace where you've had hats and T-shirts and banners, safety first? Yeah, so I got my little safety button here. Is it safe? I'm going to pass these around in our hopefully national championship bag for this year, okay? And you grab a pen if you want. Take a couple for the kids. I'll tell you, I live to give this stuff away, okay? Oh, by the way, if you want additional information on this, I just put your card in there or drop it off up here. I got tons of extra stuff to send to you on what destroys your brain. Because if you know what destroys your brain, which basically, let me tip my hand. Your number one threat to your brain is the jackass you're working with. That's the worst thing that can happen with people have ever worked someplace where you got a sick feeling in your gut just over the thought of going into that hellhole. That's killing you. Smoking has a mortality factor of 1.6. What's that mean? If you smoke, you will increase your chance of premature death by 60%. That's bad, right? That's bad. Any way you cut it, that's bad. If you work with a bully, and I don't care if you're bullying someone because they don't have any hair to follow the challenge. I don't care if you're picking on somebody because they do create things. That's not your natural color, right? It's not, you know. Or tattoos. Oh, how many people remember when you were discriminating against if you had tattoos? Wouldn't get hired? Oh, yeah. Now, we go a step further. Is it safe to disagree with each other? Oh, is it a good idea to talk politics at work? Oh, how about religion? Oh, hold that thought. Is it okay to disagree with your boss? Or are you going to get chastised? Oh, I like that. That didn't happen by accident. So, what is trust? Is it safe? And I'm going to tell you right now, most of your programs will not be successful. It won't work. You know why? It's like Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. I love it. Anybody here read that? Yeah, it's almost like, you know, even if you can't read it, it's like, oh, yeah, I've read that. Sure. Okay. Can anybody read the 7 Habits? And I love it. It's too much. The human short-term memory, under stress, on the job, can remember 2 or 3 things. I want you to remember 1. I want you to remember this. That is all you need to define your culture. And let me tell you right now, if somebody was in your office and ended up a cigarette, would you do something about it? Yeah. Well, we let bullies go around and pick on other people for stupid reasons. Why do they pick on other people? Because they can't get to first base. They're children. And if you want to see a parade of children, watch the news tonight. Sometimes they run big countries like Russia. There's a mental illness there too. Okay? We're going to talk about you control your emotional intelligence. What's that? Your ego and emotion. All you have to remember to define your culture is a baseball diamond. How many people can remember a baseball diamond? I'll tell you. Why do you want easy? Because to effectuate your culture and change it and enforce it, you got to keep it in front of people's minds. And I should be able to whisper in your ear, is it safe? Now, if you whisper that across 100 people, safe. Because you remember that? Who's got mission statements at home that go on for a whole sentence? Okay, can anybody here, can your people recite your mission statement off the top of their head? I always love that. Yeah, we got a mission statement here. What is it? Well, you can pull out the wall, read it to me. No, it's too much. If I can control my ego and emotions, that means I'm going to be tolerant. I'm going to define that for you. Now, most people can't get there because they don't slow down and think and control. So you need to focus on emotional intelligence and controlling ego and emotion. Okay? Now, if you can do that, you got to be able to make it to second base, which is easy. EPR. And I'm going to go into detail with these here for you today. Empathic listening, parroting, and rewards. That's all you've got to remember. Just like CPR. EPR for how do you resolve a conflict. You sit back and relax. Keep your heart rate under control. And then EPR. Now think about this. If you and I disagree on something, but I share with you, I understand where you're coming from. You have a right to your opinion. But here's what I think. Haven't I just proven to you that it's safe? Let me clue you in here. The only time you ever build trust with another human being is when you are. Nobody believes anything you say. But when I prove to you that we can disagree, now it's real. We've got to do that a few times over. It doesn't happen just once. The truth of the matter is we promote most supervisors because they were good technicians and they couldn't communicate their way out of a wet paper bag. So what do? They bully their people. Let me tell you right now, You cannot be in management, overseeing the biggest part of our budget, and the people who actually execute our goals. If you can't address and resolve conflict, you might be really good people, but if you're an attacker, fight. Or you're a retreater, flight. No, go back to your technical position because you can't do this job. Make sense? Okay. Emotional intelligence. Can you control your ego and emotions? The hardest thing you'll ever do, because we humans are wired for fight. We're great 5,000 years ago when we were running saber-tooth tigers. It's killing us today. Now, where do I get the tolerance stuff from? NASA. Now, let's talk about some emotional children who murder people. You want to? That sounds like it, right? NASA. Challenger has a problem. The O-rings are bad. And it's all rocket engineers. You're like Sheldon, right, from the Big Bang Theory. Does Sheldon like conflict? No. Tremendously smart. You discovered that the O-rings on Challenger are bad. And if you don't get those fixed, and I mean fixing them would be replacing them about $200 million. That if the temperature drops below 56 degrees, you got a 95% chance of blowing Challenger out of the air and killing all 7 astronauts. Okay. How many people here think, yeah, we should replace the O-ring? Yeah, what do you think? Okay, so we're going to put a letter together. Send it to top brass. Let them know, hey, this is the problem. We got to get this fixed. How many people would put your name on the letter? Hold your hands up high so I can shoot you. There you go. Corporate capital punishment for you. And hear what I'm saying with these emotional children playing in the dirt box? You fired everybody who spoke up. Okay, freeze. Is it safe to speak up at NASA? It didn't say. It didn't say. Is it safe to disagree with doctors? You know, we have 2 wrong site surgeries in this country every month. You know why? Because, you know, before you cut into any knee, leg, arm, hand, okay? Everybody in the surgical suite has to agree you're cutting into the right body part. So if everybody in the surgical suite is watching and the surgeon is about to cut into the wrong leg, the wrong knee, the wrong foot, is nobody speaking? You want to be on bedpan duty for the rest of your life? Now, understand, most surgeons, hey, you saved them, that's great. But are there some that are emotional children? Well, yeah, because we have 2 amputations or wrong site surgeries every month. Okay, see the same thing? As your IQ rises, as your titles increase, our emotional intelligence drops like fire. You ever wonder why really, really, really smart people like the leaders at NASA do incredibly stupid things? They get too big for their britches. Your number 1 culture needs to be emotional intelligence. Now, let's fast forward to Columbia. Now there's a problem on takeoff. Heat shield piece breaks off, hits the left wing, puts a hole in the wing. You are what's left of the engineers. Do you think that the next time the astronauts are outside on their spacewalk, they should take a look at the left wing and see if there's a hole in it? Because if there's a hole in it, when you're coming back, those gases and that heat, 8,000 degrees by the way, is going to go into the wing, up the fuselage. It's going to cook them alive, like marshmallows. Then it's going to blow up. Okay, what do you think? Is this a good thing to pass on? Who wants to think? You're afraid? Yeah, okay, well, you're already. You spoke up with Challenger, so the brave ones often, okay? Yeah, some people spoke up. You know what your supervisor told them? Nah, don't worry about it. Even though we got it on videotape, don't worry about it. If you go over my head, you're fired. Nobody went over their head. Okay, now, is that a problem? They put Sharon Wong, little 5-foot Sharon Wong, who runs the diversity stuff. Put a new program in place, well, expanded their program. We are going to be tolerant. Now, what's that mean? You are not going to pick on someone because they're different, because they disagree with you. Because when you attack people, just because they disagree with your ego. People die. People get hurt. Okay? So no, and I'll tell you, whole new atmosphere at NASA. Everybody with me? Very simple, tough to do because we're human. All right? Now, tolerance, I'll tell you, tolerance in the last 20 years, it has now been adopted as the standard by the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and our courts, including our Sixth Circuit, where you're sitting right now. All right, now, let's apply this. I'm not going to pick on you because you're different. So let's go back to your workplace, or you pick any workplace of the millions of workplaces in this country. Let's bring in dinner, bring in lunch, a pizza or something, and maybe some dessert, and let's sit around and have a good, honest, intellectual discussion about abortion. What do you think? It's a good idea? Well, how many people? No, you get a spork in the head. Yeah, now, why not? Are you entitled to your position? Are you entitled to your opinion? Really? In today's world, are you entitled to your position? Oh yeah, you have a right to believe what you believe as long as it agrees with mine. I will tell you, you know how bad we are with our mental condition and our intolerance of anybody who disagrees with us? We have 38,000 physical assaults that occur in American workplaces every week. It's a lot of stitches. And 2.5 murders every workday. Oh my gosh, it is much safer for your, that's emotion. Yeah, huh? Oh, how would you know? That's a good question. Yeah, it's a statistic. So today will be 10, Monday will be 7. Have nothing for Tuesday, Wednesday, because they took that off. And they're all ticked off as the time they took off, then they'll go 3, so it's 2 days. Yeah. So that's an average across the entire thing. All right, now think about this. If you voice your opinion on the NRA, is someone, not from the right and not from the left, but someone from the far, they're going to get you. They're going to attack you. They're going to go 180 degrees and get you because you disagree with it. Is someone from the far left going to cancel you, going to attack you because you had a different opinion? That's what's happening. And you know what? I love this because the further to the extreme you go, you meet the other side at 180 degrees and become the same thing. Do you have a right to attack people when they disagree with you? No. Does today's society tell you that they have a right to attack you? You see it every day. And our workplaces are a mess. Is everybody with me? And I'll tell you, you got to pound this. And when I get to the stuff on the brain stuff, I'll tell you, it is not hard when you get people who agree. Right now, I got a lot of folks like employees and they, well, I just don't like this. What do you I just tip my hand. If you act like that, you have a workplace like that, you look the crazy. You will burn your brain. How many people have ever had a job where your gut churns? You get kind of sick over the thought of going into that hellhole? Your brain is already damaged. Yeah. Oh, wait till I show you my brain. Let me tell you right now. I can be real frank. 2008, I was nuts. You know how I knew that? Because my wife told me. Right? Now, tolerance is not acceptance. You ever been told, oh, you have to be accepting first? Do I have a right to tell you how to think? Oh, wait till we get to the Satanists here in a minute. I'll tell you, you're going to get sued. This is illegal. But I'll tell you, I got diversity people all over. Oh, you have to be accepted. If I order you to be accepting of the NRA, or I order you to reject the NRA, what's that going to do to you? What do most people do? Listen, they're going to dig in. No. And I'll tell you, you want to lose your people real quick? You tell them you have to believe this, or you have to be accepting of these people. I'll tell you how to behave. Now you see why the courts and the EEOC are adopting tolerance and non-acceptance? You want to alienate your people, or you want them on board? I have to tell you how to behave. And I'll tell you right now, others disagree. This is diversity of ideas. All kinds of ideas. Now, here's a good one. I'm in Amish country, get a call from one of my clients. It's an Amish-owned bakery, okay, and they massive. I mean, just doing all kinds of stuff. They had one woman who, young girl, broke away from him. Okay, great. She became Satanist. Now, is that gonna go over good? Oh, so she dyes her hair jet black, paints her lipstick black, goes to Amazon and gets satanic jewelry and her Satanist Bible. I gotta think that's the only satanic Bible in this town. I just gotta think. Okay, now are these Amish ladies upset? Oh, they're treating her like dirt. So it's at this point when I get a call. Now, what's first base? Emotional intelligence. So I gotta be calm. I slow down, so maybe they will be calm. Okay? So then I gotta go to second base. Whenever you're in a conflict, it's EPR, EPR, EPR. You understand, our bodies flood with cortisol and adrenaline when there's a conflict. And I'll tell you, your first reaction in a conflict as a human is always wrong. It's wrong every time, because it's either to attack or retreat and slit your throat with it. No. We're gonna stand, and I'm just gonna ask him, empathic listening. Hey, Tom, what's going on? That's it. I don't lecture them. I don't explain to them what they did wrong. Do human beings want to be heard? Yes, every human being on the planet wants to be heard. So I sit back and listen. Now, at the time, I was a 55-year-old white Anglo-Saxon Protestant straight male, lived in the city my whole life. Do I see the world different than a bunch of Amish ladies who maybe made it to the 8th grade? We see things a lot different, don't we? So I gotta listen from their perspective. That's empathy. Now here's what they tell me, and I really gotta listen because I gotta parrot this back. Because I gotta make sure I understand. They say, wow, this is really offensive. We are good, God-fearing women, and this is offensive. We shouldn't have to work with her. And we've been a good, God-fearing company, and we're successful. And now that's not going to happen anymore because we got Satanist here. God is not going to bless us. Is everybody here? Okay, now I got to repeat it back to make sure that, we don't move on until they agree that I got it. Plus, this is the best CYA thing you'll ever get. You ever hear somebody later say, oh, you misunderstood? Or that was a miscommunication issue. Oh, I love it. I just sharpened my teeth on it. I cut that head off right now. I do not have communication issues. No. I asked you if I understood. You said yes. Now, are you lying now or were you lying then? No, it's got to be clear. So I repeat it back. You are good Christian women, and this is offensive to you, and you shouldn't have to see this. They say, yeah. Okay. And you have always been a good Christian company, and now that you've got a Satanist here, God isn't going to help you anymore. You can go under. They say, yeah. Okay. We're on the same page. If they say no, what do we do? Tell me again. Tell me again. Okay. But no, I got it. Now think about this. What if I just go up to them and say, well, you're wrong. You're wrong. You can't do that. Feel your gut? I just called you stupid. I just attacked you. You never flat disagree with a human. The human is an emotional animal that in 17 thousandths of a second, it can attack you. We're much faster emotionally. I reward anybody who disagrees. Disagrees right there. Do they have a right to their opinion? Yes, they do. And I'm going to tell them that. See where you're coming from? I understand, and you got a right to your opinion, and I'll tell you, I will defend to the death your right to have an opinion. And that you can't do that. Because understand, this is illegal. Satanism is a religion, and she has reported you doing it. You know that you live in Ohio. She can sue this company, but she can sue you personally. She can take your house. You want to explain to your husband is you're gonna have to cough up about $100,000 in attorney's fees to defend this, and you're gonna lose, I'll tell you. And one of them goes, yeah, but she's gonna go to hell. She's gonna burn in hell. I know, that's the goal. Don't go with her, okay? I see where you're coming from. And you can sit there and think, oh, you want. Hell. But I'm gonna control how you behave. Are you making it safe? You're not. We had a great conversation. I've proven that it's safe. Now, we got a lot of stress. I go up there a lot. They give me muffins. Okay. Now, will this destroy your brain? Let me clue you in here and we'll wrap it up in the next couple minutes. When your car won't start, when your phone won't work, that's distress. It will release distress in your body. Now, let me just explain something here. That cortisol and adrenaline, 20% will go to your brain. Your brain only makes up 2 to 3% of your body weight. It's very disproportionate, isn't it? And your brain feels like soft, room temperature butter. It's the first organ that you damage. First, now, let's say that you're getting bullied by some honestly, or you're getting bullied by your boss, or you're getting bullied at work. When that is interpersonal distress from another human being, your body knows your cell phone won't hurt you. It knows that other person might kill you. You release 3 times the cortisol in the brain. 3 times. And I'll tell you, psychological distress today, our body doesn't know what to do with it. Because physical abuse, we know how to react. Psychological distress will stay in your brain, and then you'll remember it, then you'll forget it, then you'll remember it. It'll keep putting you in and out and in and out of distress, where it's only adrenaline, 3 times the amount is when your TV goes. Okay, now, let's take a real quick look here. This is where most people get their brain disorders from. Let me just clue in to some of these other presentations. The brain on the left, everything in blue is your baseline temperature. And these are nuclear SPECT scans. These aren't MRIs. These are nuclear SPECT scans where we watch you think. You have to be alive. MRI looks the same on a live person as a dead. Okay, these are very different. Okay? Does the one on the left, it's like your engine. Does that look calm? Yeah, everything in red is burning 15% up. But overall, that looks pretty good. Does the brain on the right look like it's burning too much? Anger. Yeah, that's mine on the right. That's 2008. That is raging post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, where did I get that? From flooding of dealing with people for years. So, see the center of the brain there? That's a little touch of depression. That's normal. That's normal. That's just life. See those 2 guys? That's apprehension. That's normal. Those are our basal ganglia, our apprehension. And I'll send you all these slides so you can have it, because I want you to use this stuff. Okay? Now, see my depression? That is 10 to 15 times inflamed. I have burned my brain so much over the years that now it's full-blown clinical depression. And here, my basal ganglia, see what they're supposed to look like on the left, on the right, is again 10, 15 times inflamed. I've passed anxiety. I mean, panic attacks. And you burn your basal ganglia even more. We call that Tourette's. And that is obsessive compulsive disorder. Anybody know somebody with OCD? Yeah. How do you get that? You burn this bridge that's between your right and left hemisphere. So if the thought starts to cross over and hits your cingulate gyrus, it's actually your bridge, gets stuck. So electrical signal gets stuck, can't get off it, can't get off it, can't get off it. See that diamond? That is a very typical pattern of post-traumatic stress disorder. That is why we have 4 to 5 times more soldiers killing themselves than got killed in the war. 30% of everybody you know has that. Start making you think why we have so many mass shootings, why suicide is now through the roof, okay? And why we have so many people abusing drugs and alcohol. They're self-medicating. Now, that's my brain in 2020. Okay, the stuff I'm going to send you is on, don't do that. Okay, now freeze right there. Can you see why people, well, I don't like those people. Great. Why don't you just kill yourself now? Is that what you're doing? Oh, by the way, cortisol causes Alzheimer's. I have Alzheimer's in my brain right now. I'm not symptomatic, but you can't have a brain like I had in 2008 without that massive amount of cortisol. So guess what? Man, I tell you, I've taken care of my brain now, and I got the photographic proof to show you. You can rewire your brain. You don't have to stay crazy. And I'm going to send you a handout that's going to show you rule number 1. Get as many jackasses as you can. Get your physical, positive thoughts, eating right, all this stuff. Oh, I love the massage folks out here. You get a monthly massage to release eustress chemicals. Well, what's the bottom line? We want to make sure that we're creating environments that don't create these types of mental disorders. Okay? The American Psychological Association says your number 1 health threat for the bullies at work. Number 1, because you spend too much time at work. Make sense? Questions, comments, deep religious concerns? That's a quick look at the brain disorders and how they're prevented. Make sense? Okay, everybody get a button? All right, hey, if you want the additional materials, just try to get your card or your email address, or you can always email me at scottwarwick.com for the people online or whatever. Okay, hey, we'll turn you loose. Enjoy.
Thank you so much, Scott. That was great. Yes. All right, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll have our last presentation about marketing your wellness program.
Okay, welcome back. And we have our last speaker today. So today we have Miranda Imperi of Marketing Juice, and she has been designing marketing campaigns for small businesses since 2010. Her experience in both the agency and corporate worlds drove her to challenge the thought process around small business marketing services, which has ultimately led to the creation of Marketing Juice. Miranda is passionate about community and helping others, and Marketing Juice is driven by their enthusiasm for small business owners with the hope that Marketing Juice could help set the new standard in services that will support small business owners. So without further ado, let's welcome Miranda to the stage. Miranda.
Thank you. All right, so like she said, my name is Miranda Imperi. I own Marketing Juice. I've been in the marketing field for more than a decade, and I have built over 100 websites, helped more than 50 different businesses grow, market your businesses, grow communities. Today, I'm going to give you guys some really effective and simple tools to market your wellness program. And what's great about this is that they are universally applicable. And so it really doesn't matter if it's a wellness program or your product or your service. There are some really basic principles with marketing that apply to all of this. And so it can be an internal marketing campaign that you're going to run for a wellness program, or it can be an external one that you're going to market your company or something like that. Either way, these tools are going to help you refine your marketing messaging and make sure that you're addressing the right type of people, the actual target people you want to be with. So I've noticed, I really enjoyed listening to all of the speakers so far, and I've noticed that there's kind of like a theme in the way that the recipient of what you're offering are being talked about, and it's being very generalized. And so I know that traditionally we tend to think about demographics like in the way that we break up ages, like our first presenter, how we talked about, the baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, right? What I like to explain to people is like, take millennials for instance. We can't be generalizing millennials in our marketing thinking, because millennials span from the ages of 28 years old to 41 years old. the life experience of someone who was 28 is vastly different from someone who was 41. And their upbringing is also different. They did come of age through that technology age, but someone who's 41 is still using a centralized home computer that was dial-up internet, right, in their high school years, whereas somebody who was 28 had an iPhone, right? Everybody had a smartphone, which is completely different as a formative experience. And so when we think about how are we going to talk to millennials, you can't talk to all of them. You can't come up with a message that is going to resonate with all millennials at the same time. And what we really need to do is we need to backtrack that demographic thinking when we're talking about creating marketing messaging. And I like to use what our priority segment. And so priority segment really focuses in on what is motivating the buying decision, the decision-making factor in that person. So I'll give you an example. I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to buy shampoo. Now, the motivations, my priorities are going to inform how I decide which shampoo I'm going to buy. Am I mostly concerned about my budget, my bottom line? Because in that case, the brand, the marketing, that stuff does not factor in, right? I'm just going to whatever's on the shelf that is the cheapest bottle of shampoo. Because my budget is my primary concern, and that's what motivates all of my buying decisions. However, if my primary priority is my planet, right, is making sure that like I'm making sustainable decisions in all the things that I purchase, I might spend 2 to 3 times as much on shampoo if my priority changes, right, based on what that shampoo company is offering. Is their packaging sustainable? Are they using recycled materials? Are they contributing to pollution with their production? Right? Like I'm going to investigate those things, and I'm willing to invest more in something based on my packaging. Right? Now, that has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with my actual life experience, everything that's come before this moment, right? But what I've been exposed to, how I was raised, the area that I was raised in, my peers, what kind of career field I'm in, my level of education, all those things are factoring into that priority, that mindset. And so that's very much changing how marketing messaging falls on me. And the interesting thing is that millennials from 28 to 41 could have any level of priorities in that, right? And so that's why there's no way that you would be able to just globally reach millennials with marketing, right? And so we need to kind of rethink this. The thing that we get away from with marketing is that at its core, marketing is about people. Your marketing should focus on the actual end user that is receiving that communication, that visual, that product, that service, whatever it is, because that's the whole point of doing this in the first place. And when we think about everything in groups and demographics like that, we'll lose sight of the actual individual at the end of this time. So this information here is taken from a 2019 EY study that did a research study on the buying behaviors spanning pretty much every age demographic, right? And it broke up the digital consumer segment into 5 different priorities. So we have the affordability priority, which is people who are primarily concerned with budget. We have the health priority, so people who are concerned with their own physical well-being, right? We have the planet priority, people who are concerned with like recycling, sustainability, what's happening around them. We have society priority, which is people who are concerned with what's happening in their community or the other people, either micro community or larger local community, right? And then we also have the experience priority people, and those people are concerned with what is their actual experience with everything that they're doing, right? The experience is what matters, not necessarily. So affordability priority is the largest segment in the digital consumer segment. And that makes sense. You know, a lot of people are budget conscious, but primarily the people who fall into that demographic, majority in baby boomer or silent generation era because of the day you grew up, right? So if you think about that a little bit more, people who have experienced some type of traumatic financial event in their lifetime, like a recession or depression, are going to have this core motivation of affordability because of what they have experienced in the past. So that experience really matters in informing their priority in their buying decision. People who have a health conscious priority, right? Those people are ranging more Gen Z through Gen X because, as you've noted in some of the presentations, wellness is now becoming more of a front-end topic, right? Like all fully encompassing wellness picture, right? And so people who are a little bit younger will just resonate and have affordability. But again, it really matters how the individual was raised. Like it matters how this individual has formed into an adult, right? And entered into the economy and like what their experiences were and who would educate you and what type of education they were receiving. So yes, most of the population in the health care is Gen Z. They're still older individuals. So it's important to note. We have the planet priority, which can also be Gen X through Gen Z in majority. And those people are going to be motivated to make all of their decisions based on the impact that it's going to have to the planet, right? And this could be in their local community or it could be globally. It depends on how far this perspective the person is ranging. But everything that they're doing is motivated by, is this going to benefit the environment, right? And then society priority is a small piece of this pie. So society priorities and experience priority, those are the two smallest cohorts of the digital consumer segments that was researched in this study. And these people tend to have more money. So this is, and that's why, is because we have a pretty big wealth discrepancy in our society. And so the people with more money have more flexibility and more luxury to select any of these priorities over a right? That's important to note. When it comes to marketing, it becomes almost impossible to market to people who have the affordability priorities that are cheap and fair. Because the only thing that matters to them is how much it costs. And if that is not 100% in your marketing, but like that is what you're marketing, this is it, this is what we offer, and this is what it costs, and it's not the cheapest thing, it's not going to be successful. And so it becomes a lot easier to market tailored based on these other priorities, because you're never going to win out with really great visuals and messaging and pulling on the heartstrings when people are making all of their buying decisions based on affordability. So once we have the priority nailed down, right? Like, and this is an exercise that I'm going to show you how to do. But once we have this priority nailed down, this is like the first step in creating marketing strategy. So your population, whether it's your internal staff or it's external, you're doing external marketing, that population you're talking to, figuring out that priority is going to inform everything else that you do from here. And so when you start to create your content, there are a few rules that you should stick by. And that is always include a visual. And that visual element is the important greatly in order to use, right? And then the next thing that we have is that we must tailor the content to the channel audience, right? And this is also important because there is a lot of different, there's a lot of variation in the ways that you distribute digital marketing content there. Many different modes of sending things, different email marketing systems, and all companies have something different. Maybe you have an internal system that you use. It's very important that the content that you design to create to go out to those people fits. Who here has received an email with a PDF attached as a marketing piece? Yeah. The problem with that is that a lot of internal company structures, their inboxes are going to kick those attachments. They're going to flag them as spam, right? They're going to be, they're going to look suspicious. How about have you received an email that is just a regular email from a person and has the blind carbon copy, right? Everybody's gotten one of those. That can be flagged as spam as well, right? And so it's really important that the content that you're going to put out there is properly tailored to that mode of delivery. That's going to give you credibility. So to the end user, you're trying to communicate that you have something that they not really want, that they need. If you end up looking like a joker or an amateur, like PDF or email, it's going to automatically. So that's another really important step in this concentration. We start with this priority motivation. Make sure our visual elements are marketed properly and they resonate with that priority. And then we make sure that our content fits into the space that we're putting it in, so it looks like we know what we're doing. Also, authenticity is impeccable. I think that we've passed the this stage of like the car salesman era in the way that we try to sell things to people. People are a little bit more savvy and they can tell, like when you're trying to pull something, you know, and so that is important in your content. So what I mean by this is if everything that you have uses like stock photos of like very corporate and cold, you know, like imagery with everybody has gray suits on, and the women are all blonde, and they're all tall and handsome, and they're just sitting around at a computer and laughing about who knows what, that doesn't resonate with people anymore. It's not relatable. We all know that that got pulled out from Google Images. Everybody knows that now. And it's a lazy strategy, right? It's so easy, it's lazy, and what that looks like to the end user, it looks like that these people don't care really enough to like make anything special or unique about their marketing for this program, so why should I give them marketing? It also makes it look like you don't know what you're talking about. If you can't take the time to create like imagery that represents what you're trying to accomplish in the end, right? Then like you also probably don't know much about the program either. So make sure that these 3 rules are followed when you are creating that content. So again, I'm going to hit on this visual content. This slide, and I will send this to anybody who wants it. It's just like goes over the different image requirements. Now, if you're using social media as a method of distribution to market your program, it's really important that you stay tailored to the channel, like we talked about in point number 2 on the last slide. And so there are different image requirements. And what I always recommend to people is, if you haven't heard of Canva, Canva is a super handy tool. And it's not the only tool, but it is free. And it already has template in it. If you type in Facebook post, it will create a Facebook post template for you that is appropriate for Facebook. Same thing with Instagram, stories. They also have worlds of so any stock video, any stock photo that you might want to use, those are in that free version of Canva. You can pay for it, and it's like $15 a month for all of those. It's really an incredible tool, and it's very much like evolved the whole graphic design industry as well. And so it makes it more accessible to look like you know what you're doing in marketing without having to pay a ton of money to a graphic designer or spend a lot of time and money on expensive software. You're learning how to use it. And so, not to say that graphic design is outdated. I still recommend using a graphic design professional. And if you don't have the time or the money to do that, there are these million games out there. And it's going to take you like maybe an extra, right, to add on to your content creation page this marketing. But it is worth it because at the end of the day, you know, we want it to be successful. We want it to resonate with people who are distributing to. And so if it's not properly tailored to where it's going, again, we're going to look like an amateur. So before you start creating, I always tell my staff or any client, ask yourself 3 questions. So first off, who am I talking to? And do I understand the needs and the interests of my audience? Right? If that answer is no, we go back to the drawing board and right? Is there anything happening in the world or in my local community that might be related to my business? So is there anything happening right now that is directly relevant that you could put into your marketing, to your programming? And then, are there any specific events or promotions you need to include? Because believe it or not, after you focus in on those things, it's really easy to forget that. You like the call to action, the whole reason why you are putting this out in the first place. Do I have a way for people to engage with it? What happens a lot of the time with marketing anything that you created is you lose sight of what is actually interesting to who would need or want this. And we start to focus on the things that we like, right? So like the biggest mistake of the business owner that they love their businesses so much, they know the inside, they know every little detail, all the little minutiae, everything works, industry, services, right? And the things that they end up talking to people about, they do not. Like I like to eat, I do not know if communication. I just want to know that you made the pie. Right? But somebody who made that pie, they love making that pie. They want to tell me about the rolling pin that they used that was like $500, right? I don't care about that. And that's not going to buy your pie, right? What is going to make you? You won't know unless you ask me, right? I'm the consumer. And so it's really important that we focus in on like who we're talking to instead of why you think this is all. That becomes irrelevant. So this is the exercise that I use. Actually, do another workshop with people doing this specific exercise. And this is something that, again, if you send me an email, I'll send you a template that you can use to build in. But before you do anything to create a marketing for anything, build your customer avatar. And this very much dovetails back into what we were talking about. The overgeneralization, right? So I want you to think about, like, let's say your target audience, you originally said millennials in Northeast Ohio, right? Millennials in Northeast Ohio. Could you imagine sitting down and with all of the millennials? I mean, absolutely not. It would be impossible, right? Would you be able to even say anything to that group of people that would universally resonate? No. And they have all relatively similar, demographic lineups, right? They're in a specific footprint in an area, right? They all live in the same relative area, and then they're all in the same group age of millennials, right? But every single one of them is vastly different. And so the benefit of sitting down and creating customer avatars is that you can actually sit down and picture yourself sitting down with coffee with right? And talking to them about what their life is. And so in order to do this correctly, the goal is to get down, to narrow it down to one singular person. This doesn't have to be a real person. It can be somebody that you make up in your head. But what's really important about this exercise is that you give them a name. Because then they become real. You can actually think about like their experiences, right? So let's say you start wide, right? And you say, I want to talk to a millennial in your business. Well, how old is a millennial, right? Do you want to talk to an older millennial or younger, right? So let's go with like 38-year-old Northeast Ohio. Well, there's still a lot of people that apply in that group, right? And so we narrow it down further. Now, maybe we want to say they're definitely a male in Northeast Ohio, 38 years old. And then there's still a lot of people that are applying. So you see where I'm going with this, is you keep narrowing it down until you can just get to one person. Until you have Kevin, this 38-year-old that lives in the Valley in Akron and works at First Energy as an electrical engineer, lives alone at super house and hangs out at the local Valley bars on weekends, and has a German Shepherd, you know, that he walks all the time and takes over and goes, right, like now I'm actually thinking of a real human being, a person. And when I think about my program that I'm going to market to him, I know exactly what I would say to him that would resonate with him for this program, right? I know exactly how I could solve issues in Kevin's life because I've already done this exercise of building this avatar. And what's important is that you build multiple avatars, and then you can start creating content from there. Because once I have a really specific person in mind, it's so easy for me to create a bunch of marketing content. If you start the other way around, it's really hard. And I don't know if you guys have ever done much marketing content creation, but you sit down and you start creating stuff and you just get stuck. And it feels monotonous, it feels difficult, it feels like moving through mud. And so this exercise will help you to expedite that process and refine that marketing message. And the beauty of this too is that I get a lot of feedback. Then doesn't that alienate who's not Kevin? No, it doesn't. Because it's likely that there are people who are similar to Kevin, right? There are multiple Kevin-esque people out there who are going to resonate with that content. But what I think people don't sometimes consider when it comes to like super targeting and niche marketing is that everybody's trying to talk to the person. Nobody's really trying to talk to the person. And when you try to talk to the person, you stand out. You rise to the top of that pile. People start to notice you. If everybody's talking to that group, I mean, I will tell you, that's how most millennials feel in a general way. Everybody's just yelling. Buy this, do this, build this, don't do this, don't buy this, don't eat this, read this, right? That's all the world is around us. You're talking about the screen, that's all the screens are moving to us. You don't need that patient who are standing there just innocently pumping your gas. And the screen is shouting at you, go inside and get a coffee and play a candy bar, they're on sale, right? It is, and you can't get away from it. And none of that is targeted to me. Right? It's not resonating. And eventually it all just becomes a fade away in the background. And so if your program hits on specifics that would really, I would care about personally, my ears are going to turn up. I'm going to listen. If it looks good, right? If it feels good. People are motivated by how they feel, right? And so that feeling has to come through. And you can't do that in a generalized way. You have to generalize. But you could create a lot of different verticals of marketing based on your different customer avatars. maybe you have Kevin, and maybe you have Stephanie, and maybe you have Taylor. Then you have 3 different types of content. So, just to recap, marketing is about people. That's the core principle here. So what I want you to take away today is that your marketing should always surround that central fact. It is about the people. Don't stray away. Put the people first in your marketing strategy. Traditional demographic segmentation is dated, and it can dehumanize marketing. So use the priority setting. Create the customer avatar before you start creating any marketing. If you can't picture your avatar like actually engaged, then you like want the goal is that you have an actual physical person you're picturing, right? And then visual elements, super crucial to any marketing campaign. If your visual elements, I'm talking images, but also text-based elements. Don't use 100 different types of flyers, right? Try to narrow it down to be consistent with your brand. If your company has a style guideline, then use that, right? So that's all I've got for you today. Feel free to email me at Miranda@marketingjuice.biz. I have this card on the table out there. And you can visit our website for any support, and I will absolutely share any of these slides with you if you want to use them.
All right. Can you guys hear me? Okay, I think so. Good. All right. Thank you, Miranda. That was awesome. I think we all took something away from today, from either marketing or, we had so many great speakers. I honestly appreciate all the speakers, all the support that we got from our speakers. Again, they are here to support the Wellness 360 and support, all our wellness professionals in the area on Zoom. We realize that sometimes it is a hard profession to be in. You don't get a lot of support maybe from your employees or your employers. It's kind of elusive out there. What is wellness? What is well-being? So we definitely, the Wellness 360 conference wants to be there for you to help your job get easier. Hopefully you walk away with some little tools that you can take back, but also feel a little bit better also walking away for your own personal wellness. Because we all know, like, when we feel good, we help other people feel good, and we do better at our jobs. So I'm definitely hoping that you all got something today. There will be a survey going out, so please fill out that survey. It'll be in your email. And then any upcoming events that we plan on doing will be coming out to via your email, so definitely check that. Again, I want to thank our sponsors. Couldn't have done this without them. And also the committee. We have a great committee. If you're interested in joining our committee, let me know. But in the room right now, we have Pamela from SumaCare. She's on our committee. You can see how Pamela, she's been up here a lot. We have Stephanie, who is helping with registration. She's from the Cleveland Clinic, Mercy. We have Bryce, who is outside right now. He's with Fitbit Google. Myself, as the executive director, I'm with Apex Skin also. And then we also have 2 at home who are on maternity leave. So taking care of the little babies at home. So again, thank you all for coming today. And I hope you enjoy your afternoon. Hopefully you can get out there, take a walk, take a bike ride, and get some more wellness time that's just for you. So have a great day. Thanks again.